Chapter 152. At that moment, his true face was revealed under the reflection of the sea of blood. On the burly body covered in thick hair, in addition to Yu Jun's head, there were two other heads hidden on both sides. One of them was a ferocious banshee with countless snake hair, and the other was a sphinx that had disappeared without a trace. At this moment, there was not an inch of Lao Zhao's body that was originally his. No, it should be said that for a crowd-funded stigmata like the Stitched, there was no such thing as an original, right? But his current appearance was even more terrifying. It wasn't just Yin Yan's mystical iron boots, the Sphinx's head, and the snake-haired banshee's petrifying eyes. Behind him, there were also a few long, wriggling tails. They clearly had snake-like scales, but they had suckers that looked like octopus's tentacles. After a long period of hiding and collecting, Lao Shao had now gathered almost all the bodies of the passengers on the ship onto himself. It was hard to say whether it was ugly or ferocious. The crudely pieced-together limbs gathered on his body, and they were integrated into one, without any trace of stitching. It looked so harmonious, as if they were born that way. He had completed his mission. He had successfully completed another sublimation, and advanced from the original, Stitched. This was his secret, the mission he had to complete. Otherwise, in the sea without strong preservatives and special anti-rejection drugs, the Stitched that was forcibly pieced together would not even live for a few days before it decayed and died. And now, he had successfully gotten rid of the shadow of death that was chasing after him. With the help of Jaga's magic potion and the countless limbs he had collected, he had completed the transformation and rebirth. Few people knew about the Stitched, a miracle that only appeared in modern times. In history, it was unknown how many of these incomplete and remote genealogies had quietly disappeared. Naturally, no one would know how incredible the advancement of a Stitched person was. Chimera. The moment he recognized this advancement, Huaishur widened his eyes in shock and disbelief. Or, to put it in a more precise and appropriate modern term, chimera. By definition, an organism is composed of cells of different genotype. However, unlike the sutured corpses or flesh war chariots, and unlike the sutured humans who had to face the threat of decay and death, the chimeras were alive, and they were born this way. Even if it was acquired, it had a variety of different characteristics, and simply and crudely gathered all the advantages into one. And this miracle of reuniting the many fragments into one was the true body of the chimera. Amidst the torrential rain of metal that could destroy any form of flesh and bones, old Shao laughed heartily and spread his arms as if he was taking a bath, welcoming the crazy firepower. After the Sphinx was eliminated by him, the pharaoh was killed by Lily, and then Koth was killed by Enyan's scheme. The last person who could become his enemy, Papaya, had rejected the god's attempts to fool her. She chose to commit suicide in her madness. On the other hand, he had already stepped over piles of corpses, completed his accumulation and breakthrough, and stepped into the fourth stage. Xing'an. Even if the power of the soul didn't exist in this game and he couldn't get the blessing of the soul perspective, he was now completely different from ordinary lifeforms. He wasn't afraid of the damage of any ordinary metal. At best, chemical-powered bullets were nothing more than an insignificant drizzle to him. Regardless of whether it was his extraordinary vitality, his strength and speed that were almost like those in horror stories, or the various abilities that he had stolen from others, they all allowed him to easily wipe out all of them. Now, there was no one who could be his opponent. Amidst the captain's roar, the rotating machine gun suddenly paused, and the ammunition chain was emptied. There was a momentary pause, and when everyone looked up again, Lao Shao had already disappeared from where he had been standing. He had disappeared. Not a sound was heard. Then, as if teleporting, the huge body appeared behind the captain. The captain roared and crushed his pipe. His muscles bulged as he turned around abruptly and punched the enemy behind him. However, that fist was easily wrapped up by a tentacle. Then, His other arm was crushed between the Sphinx's teeth. Then, the captain saw the head of the countless snake-haired, wriggling banshees. The captain roared and raised his head brazenly, crashing into the countless wriggling venomous snakes. He didn't care if his face was bitten to pieces, but his movements stopped halfway. As if frozen, a stone-like grayish-white color spread across his face and covered his entire body. In front of the banshee's eyes, he turned into an angry stone statue. F***CKU mother. At the last moment, the captain stood in front of Lily. Using all his strength, he raised his middle finger at old Xiao. The next moment, the stone statue fell apart. In the scattered dust, the dried flowers that had lost their fragrance fell into the pool of blood on the ground, crushed into mud, and disappeared without a trace. However, right after that, another cyborg picked up the axe left behind by Huai Shi and rushed toward old Xiao. With all his strength, he chopped down on the snake-haired banshee's face. Several crew members pounced from behind and hugged old Xiao's arms and legs tightly. Someone stuffed the fallen Gatling into the Sphinx's open mouth, propping up the sharp fangs. In the next moment they were torn to pieces. It was as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It was like tearing a thin piece of paper. But when his broken body landed on the ground, the unconscious cyborgs still used the last of their strength to pull at his hind legs and open their mouths, trying to leave a deep bite mark on the layer of scales. In the end, old Xiao raised his foot and stomped down. In the roar, the cruise ship shook. Blazing flames and acid spewed out from his two mouths respectively, burning the burden hanging on his body to ashes. However, even more people rushed up and blocked his path. Old Xiao roared and roared. Against the countless people pulling at him, he charged forward angrily and crushed all the bugs in front of him. But when he looked up again, he could no longer find Lily and Huai Shi. They had escaped, but this was above the vast sea. They had no way to escape. Go forward, turn right, and climb up the ladder directly. Panting, the first mate shoved a blood-stained key into Lily's hand. There's a lifeboat hidden in the dust-proof cloth below the rear deck. You can take it and leave this place. The second mate will take you there. What about you? Come with us. Lily reached out to pull him back, but he took a step back. There was a smug expression on his burned face. No, I have my job. As long as you can survive, it's fine. He stared at the girl in front of him, slowly stepped back, and solemnly said goodbye. You have to survive and replace us. Heavy footsteps could be heard in the corridor behind them. At the last moment, the first mate looked back at the girl in the distance, smiled, and waved goodbye. The gate was closed. His roar and roar came from behind the door. Then, there was no more sound. Lily did not dare to look again. She suppressed the urge to cry and ran forward. Broken cyborgs constantly bid farewell to the team and stayed behind. They disappeared amidst the shouts and roars. In the end, the second mate, who was gasping for breath, gently put Huai Shi on his back on the ground and smiled at her. I'll send you here. The thin young man hesitated for a moment and asked softly, Miss, can you hug me? Lily resisted the urge to cry and nodded vigorously. It's good. This is the taste of life. The cyborg whispered softly, gently loosened his arm, took a step back and smiled gratefully. Live, miss, please live. This was the final goodbye. He turned around, smashed the glass cabinet next to him, pulled out a fire axe, shouted, and rushed into the cabin behind him. Lily could not hold back her tears anymore. She choked, reached out, picked up Huai Shi on the ground, and walked step by step to the lifeboat hanging behind. But as she walked, she felt that Huai Shi's breathing was getting weaker and weaker. After his pulse disappeared, his heartbeat also stopped. His breathing stopped. Huai Shi, can you hear me? She shook the vampire's shoulder in fear, but there was no response. Huai Shi lowered his head, and the fragments peeled off from his broken face. Not a sound was heard. Are you going to die too? The girl finally understood. She wanted to cry, but she didn't even have the strength to cry. Why do you have to die too? Say something. She knelt on the ground in a sorry state, futilely sprinkling all the potions on Huaishi's body, and weakly begged, Are you bothering me again, Huaishi? Aren't we friends? I beg you to say something, please, please. In the dim and broken dream, Huaishi seemed to be falling into a dark abyss, endlessly downward. He felt that he might die. No, he was definitely going to die. The kind that was certain death. Ai Qing, are you there? He called softly. But there was no response. It was as if the distance was too far, and he couldn't even feel the existence of Ai Qing. Maybe the signal here wasn't very good? But that didn't matter anymore. In the deep drowsiness, everything became unimportant. He closed his eyes and let the cold of death engulf him little by little like a tide. It seemed that he had forgotten something important. There seemed to be the sound of burning and breaking. It seemed that someone was calling him, but he couldn't hear it clearly. He tried in vain to open his eyes, using all his strength. Then he saw the burning sailboat, the dark sky, and the sea as quiet as blood. The endless sea seemed to cover everything, just like death. The new world was still out of reach. For example, hope, relief, redemption. All the beautiful things were too far away. It was always sad. He stared blankly at the crying girl. His lips opened and closed with difficulty, but he couldn't make a sound. Unfortunately, no one can save you. He wanted to say, I'm sorry. Don't leave me alone. I beg you, in the dizziness, Huaishi heard the girl's desperate words. Please live, then. It was as if sweet dew had fallen on his dry lips. It was like a miracle rain. Chapter 153. It was as if time had stopped for an instant. Golden rain flowed down from the girl's wrist and fell into Huaishi's mouth. Between the dark and cruel world, that line of bright gold was like a miracle, so gorgeous that it was intoxicating. At this moment, with the loss of blood, endless vitality comparable to the philosopher's stone flowed out from it. It was a terrifying amount that could create an android legion with just a few grams. Now, with Lily's generous water, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, sprinkled down. At all costs. Even if it was to put out the fire, even if it was futile. She persistently continued Huaishi's last line of vitality. It was like a lonely hand, pulling at him, not allowing him to leave without permission. Please live. Lily shed tears and smiled at him awkwardly. Stay, don't be the only one left, please. In his dizziness and pain, Huaishi raised his hand with difficulty, wanting to touch her cheek. He felt the tears falling on his fingertips, so cold. The raised palm stopped abruptly in the air. In the end, it fell weakly to the ground. Only the sound of something breaking could be heard. No matter how generous the fountain of life was, no matter how Lily cried out in distress, there was no longer any light in his empty eyes, only reflecting the dark sky and the blood-like sea, reflecting this cruel world. There was no more sound. Lily stared at him blankly, unable to believe it. For a long, long time she let out a hoarse cry, but no one responded. Heavy footsteps stopped in front of her. There was a line of footprints with blood. Is he already dead? Old Xiao murmured regretfully, sighed, and slowly raised his 5 beastly fingers, aiming at Lily's face. I'm sorry I had to do this, although this is just a game. At that moment, 5 fingers as sharp as knives were raised and stabbed at the sluggish girl. A shrill sound broke through the air like a scream. Then, the screams came to an abrupt stop in front of a cracked palm. His wrist was clenched tightly. After countless fragments of the broken palm peeled off, silver-white bones were exposed. It was as if the gate of hell had been suddenly opened. From the empty eyes, there was a surging blood light. You're not allowed. The dead vampire slowly raised its head. Amidst the sound of countless pieces of flesh peeling off, the broken face revealed a skeleton that seemed to be made of metal. It was so ferocious. It was clearly an empty shell that had already lost its soul, but under the push of the remnant's stubbornness, the shattered vampire actually crawled up from the ground once more, blocking in front of the chimera. His hoarse voice sounded like metal roaring as he enunciated each word clearly to the enemy before him. "You're not allowed to touch her." In his dizziness, Huaishur felt that he had once again fallen into the abyss. Holy light shone from the sky, carrying endless majesty and solemnity. It indifferently stared at his sorry state, watching him kneel before the altar. "This is your last chance, Abraham, and the last mercy of the Holy Spirit." The old bishop looked down at him coldly. Holding the scepter in his hand, he gave his last order: "Abraham, kill her, and you will still be saved." In the silence, only Huaishur's pained moans could be heard. He gasped for breath with difficulty, crawling forward in a sorry state. He stretched out his trembling hand, as if he wanted to grasp the light of nothingness and salvation. But until the end, he did not speak. "Trash! You disappoint me." The bishop's face twitched and gradually turned ashen. "Since you don't repent, then you and that heretic can drown in God's fury." Without a shred of sympathy, he turned and left, abandoning Huaishur in the darkness. But immediately after, he felt a palm pressing on his shoulder. A hoarse voice sounded from behind him. "Close at hand." "I'm sorry, Father." Unknowingly, Huaishur had already crawled up from the ground. He lowered his head, staring at the neck that was close at hand, and said softly, "Others didn't give it to me. I prefer to take it myself." At that moment, the old bishop let out a sharp scream. The vampire's fangs were already deeply nailed into his neck, frantically extracting his blood. He sucked in big mouthfuls, wantonly gorging like a hungry dog. No matter how hard he struggled, begged, or angrily rebuked. Until the end, there was no more sound. In the dead silence, Huaishur slowly opened his mouth. Then, the shriveled corpse fell on the altar. Huaishur lowered his head and stared at the terrified face of death. He slowly raised his hand and wiped away the last trace of sweet blood at the corner of his mouth. Then, he bent down and took the scepter from his hand. "Now, does anyone else have an order for me?" The young man raised his head and stared at the holy light above the vault of heaven. In the dead silence, no one spoke. So, facing the cold gazes of the gods, the rebellious vampire slowly raised the scepter in his hand and smiled happily. "Isn't it just salvation? I have it." At that moment, the holy light dissipated. The abyss collapsed. Huaishur opened his eyes and saw the pitch-black vault of heaven and the endless sea of blood. He had returned to this gloomy vault of heaven, even if he was already shattered and only bones were left. He slowly turned his head and stared at the startled girl behind him. A smile appeared on his broken face. "I'll fight for you, my lady." Boom! The chimera's tentacles swept across. Huaishur flew backwards and smashed into the mast, completely breaking it. The broken sails fell into the burning flames and burned fiercely. From the flames, the broken Huaishur crawled up like a clay doll. He lowered his head and looked at his tragic state, then raised his hand towards old Shaw, who was slowly walking over. "Wait a minute, let me flip through the book. We'll fight after I flip through it." He waved his hand and pulled out the Book of Destiny. He pathetically flipped through the records left behind by the bishop, looking for records in the fragmented handwriting. But old Shaw did not give him any chance. He stretched out his hand and two tentacles flew out from his sleeves and wrapped around Huaishur's legs. He was pulled into the air and then slammed onto the deck. It was as if he was holding a hammer. All the cabins within sight were smashed into pieces. Countless fragments flew everywhere. In the end, only a silver-white skeleton was left in the ruins. Strands of golden blood flowed on the silver skeleton, slowly shining with light, as if it was embellished with an array of steel. He was actually still alive? Old Shaw frowned unhappily. The two heads on his shoulders suddenly opened and spewed acid and poisonous fire. They gathered into a tide and swept straight towards Huaishur. "So, that's how it is?" At that moment, the broken skeleton nodded in understanding. He stretched out his hand and pulled out the solemn scepter from the Book of Destiny. He slowly raised its sharp end. He aimed it at his own chest. Stabbed down. Boom. The flames engulfed everything. But then, from the terrifying temperature that was enough to melt steel into liquid, a holy light shone from the remains of the vampire. It was as if it had turned into the sun in an instant. Endless fierce light spewed out from Huai Shi's chest. It came from the scepter. It was purification. Huai Shi was actually purifying himself. The holy light that was 100 times more powerful than holy water was coldly spreading over Huai Shi's body. Inch by inch it killed the vampire's dark substance and body. Old Shaw did not even need to do anything. He was simply committing suicide. But in this cold purification that did not leave any trace, Huai Shi opened his hand happily and welcomed the arrival of the end. Deliberately mystifying. Old Shaw snorted coldly. In an instant, a violent wind was stirred up. He raised his fist and punched towards Huai Shi's broken head. At that moment, Huai Shi raised his palm. The finger bone that was bathed in the holy flame was shining brightly. It slowly unfolded and blocked the front of the beast fist. Boom! The storm, the tide, and the loud noise came to an abrupt halt in front of this palm in an instant. Old Shaw raised his head in shock. He heard the sound of steel rubbing against Huai Shi's broken face. There seemed to be a seed of iron growing in that ferocious skull. It grew inch by inch from the broken skull and covered the ferocious face of the skull, turning into a solemn and cold mask. Behind the mask, a light suddenly lit up in the pair of pitch-black eye socket. Huai Shi opened his mouth, shouted, and roared. The silent sound was given substance. The blazing light turned into a torrent, gushing out from his eyes and mouth. It went straight forward and instantly pierced through Old Shaw's arm, burning that mutated arm into ashes. The scepter cracked inch by inch. At the moment when all the vampire parts were burned, a bright glow flowed out from Huai Shi's remaining silver bones, covering his skeleton and turning into a brand new body. In the light, the power of countless holy spirits riveted, connected, woven, and entangled with each other. It was as if there was a substantial light flowing on the remaining skeleton, no, on the holy bones. In an instant, a new miracle emerged from the void. As Huai Shi moved forward, countless golden lines appeared on the silver mask above his head. In the void, a pure light opened up and intertwined into a ring. It hung high and scattered a cold and stern light in all directions. When he took the first step, the matrix of steel and the holy bones of iron all over his body cried. Countless tiny sounds overlapped with each other and turned into a grand song. It was so holy. When he took the second step, a cracking sound came from his back. It was the sound of old bones breaking, and also the clear cry of a new miracle being born. With a sharp sound, sparks flew. Branches of iron rose from his back inch by inch. On the countless veins, light condensed into fine hairs, forming a pair of wings so large that they seemed to be able to stand above the sky. Wings of steel. It was as if the legendary holy spirits were walking between heaven and earth, delivering punishment and destruction. I heard you advanced? Between the dark sky and the blood-red sea, the angel of steel stood between this cruel world. He looked down at the stunned chimera, and the corners of his mouth curled up in a smile behind the mask. What a coincidence, me too. Using 100 times more sins to temper a person's soul, injecting the miracle of the holy spirits into the silver and implanting it into the bone marrow. Then, using the blood of countless people to irrigate and nurture it, planting the seed of salvation in the abyss of depravity. When the infinite darkness burned out, light would spurt out from the abyss. When the original sin was purified, salvation would come. This was the salvation that Van Helsing yearned for, the advancement of vampires, angel of might. Huai Shi raised his palm and clenched it in the direction of the burning sailboat below. An invisible gravitational force burst forth, and the sound of steel rang. The blood-stained silver axe whistled and fell into his hand. Towards the angry chimera. Slash! Chapter 154. Boom. In the blink of an eye, the chimera flew backward. Plowing two deep fissures in the deck, Elder Shao stood firm and roared. Dozens of tentacles shot out from his body and shot towards Huai Shi, who was in midair. The speed was unbelievably fast, but in the eyes of the Angel of Karma, it was surprisingly slow. Huai Shi moved forward an inch. The air was torn apart by the steel body, bursting with roaring air waves. The white impact swept out and flattened the surrounding wreckage in an instant. He felt as if he had become a supersonic fighter jet. If he wanted to, he could go all out. From stillness to movement in a short instant, he reached a speed of about Mach 3. In front of such a huge speed, even the overly desolate sea and sky became narrow. Such a short gap was almost instantaneous. Like a shooting star, he descended from the sky and jumped between the countless entangling tentacles. The burning axe blade drew a sharp trace in the air. Wherever it passed, all the tentacles were shattered. Blood splattered and was immediately vaporized. And Huai Shi was already close at hand. He aimed at the chimera in front of him and punched. Under the wind pressure, the mutated limbs rippled like water. When the fist arrived with a terrifying air wave and blazing temperature, the flesh and blood fell apart, revealing a pitch-black skeleton. Cracks appeared on the skeleton. But then it was repaired. Before the disintegrated flesh and blood could evaporate, new flesh and blood emerged from the wound. This time it had evolved. The hard chitin skeleton pierced out of the body and covered old Zhao's body. Then, as the flesh and blood wriggled, it quickly formed a buffer layer between the exoskeleton and the internal organs. In an instant it was unrecognizable. The only thing left was a giant wrapped in pitch-black bones. This was the chimera. A rank 4 sublimator that could absolutely adapt to any environment, any battle, and any place. With such an excessive genetic reserve, Old Shao could obtain the characteristics of any dark creature at any time and strengthen it. There was even a pair of bone wings slowly growing on his back. Soon, the flesh and blood multiplied, turning into bat-like wings covered in scales. After breaking free from the limitations of gravity, he grinned at Huai Shi. The head of the banshees on his right shoulder suddenly opened her eyes and stared at Huai Shi. But her gaze only had time to leave two lime-like dots on the back of Huai Shi's raised axe. In the next moment, Huai Shi disappeared on the spot. Then, he appeared behind him. Old Shao turned around in shock. Then, he saw Huai Shi's unfurled steel wings and her blade-like wings. He also saw the 16 flaming swords shooting out of her nostrils and a hurricane.*What's the use of having wings? Are you stupid? This is my holy light jet engine. Even Huai Shi himself did not King expect that the wings of the Angel of Authority had vectoring nozzles for acceleration. But when he thought about it, dozens of steel feathers suddenly fell off from his back, drawing dozens of complicated arcs in the air. With blazing light, they bombarded the chimera's body. In an instant, the bat wings were torn apart and riddled with holes. Under the bombardment of the metal feathers, several bloody holes appeared on the hard exoskeleton. The steel feathers that slowly opened up like tree branches were deeply wedged into the flesh. As they were pulled out, they brought with them a bloody whirl. It was incomparably ferocious. There are missiles too? Huai Shi was stunned. Is this King Angel of Authority or a holy light fighter? After a moment of astonishment, he abruptly retreated, increasing the distance between them. His steel wings unfurled, and flames suddenly burst forth between the sky and the sea. Hundreds of blazing rays of light gushed out from within, and the steel wings flew into the sky, whistling as they shot out, bringing with them streaks of sharp marks. They intersected with each other, and turned into a storm, instantly sweeping towards the chimera. Countless rays of light intersected in this metal storm. The surface of the sharp iron pieces was so smooth, like a mirror reflecting the bright light. From afar, it looked like a whirling hurricane of light and iron. In just an instant, the chimera was cut into pieces. Blood spurted out and dyed the steel crimson red. The steel feathers sank deep into the bones all over his body, causing him to roar in pain. His flesh was badly mutilated. Huaishi's face also turned pale, and he felt weak. The light was like his blood. At this moment, he was also in a state of bleeding. In a moment of carelessness, he almost forgot that his angel of authority was a pirated version. The so-called punishment for breaking an oath now seemed to be part of the sublimation. How ironic! Van Helsing probably never dreamed that the redemption he had been bitterly seeking was hidden in his body by the Church, in the punishment he was incomparably resistant to and fearful of, casting a sharp light with thousands of times the darkness, and then washing away the darkness with a thunderous method to reforge a sharp blade. In the Holy Spirit lineage, the convenience of the vampire as a tool did not lie in its outstanding ability as an executioner, but also in its own cruel tempering and unimaginable soul torture. Only in this way could the most perfect fighting machine be tempered from the depths of the darkness. Angel of authority! The so-called punishment for breaking an oath was a sublimation mechanism buried in the vampire's body in advance. When the cardinals believed that a sinner had redeemed his sins and could be redeemed, or that the sinner was too useless to be destroyed, this mechanism would be activated from the inside out, quickly burning the vampire to ashes. The difference was that the consciousness of the one being redeemed would be maintained under the grace of the Holy Spirit and survive the purest burning stage. Then, under the grace of the Holy Spirit, they would rise in rank and become a fearless member of the Holy Spirit army, a saint and angel walking in the mortal world. For Huaishi, except for the punishment for breaking an oath, the other two steps were all wrong. One was maintained by Lily with her own miracle blood, and the other came from the scepter he had obtained as a traitor by backstabbing the bishop. There was no activation code for either. This kind of self-modified illegal car had to avoid the traffic police on the road, let alone replenishing fuel at the official gas station. In other words, the fuel tank was only so big, and there was only so much fuel. He had to drive leisurely. Fortunately, he at least had some experience in driving an illegal modified car. Even if he could not catch anyone, he could still drive slowly back and forth on Akina Mountain. It was a pity that such a cool flying tool could only make people feel good for a while. Huaishi regretfully shook his head and sighed. On the steel wings, the light that had been gradually dimming was reinvigorated and forcibly lit up. The burning flames set off a terrifying airflow, propelling him towards the incomplete chimera. In the air, the shining axe blade was rubbed red by the high-speed airflow, bursting with a burning glow. Boom! The steel wings crisscrossed past, dragging the axe blade as they chiseled a huge hole in the chimera's body. Eugene's head flew high into the air, burning into a lump of charcoal as the wings swept past. Then, in mid-air, the flames spurting out from Huaishi's left wing suddenly weakened, while the flames from his right wing surged. As if being pulled by an invisible rope, it drew a dangerous arc along an axis of nothingness. After completing an almost exaggerated sharp turn, blazing flames once again emerged from the vector nozzle, and waves of air gushed out. Huaishi turned back. This time, the chimera roared, raising its mangled left arm and smashing it towards Huaishi. Relying on its prediction of the trajectory, it launched an attack at a distance that Huaishi would not be able to dodge. In an instant, Huaishi's pupils dilated. Seeing the black shadow smashing towards his face, he subconsciously turned around in the air. Under the terrifying speed, the ailerons on his wings were raised to the limit, and the 16 vector nozzles quickly changed direction. The hurricane suddenly shook, pulling his body into a rapid spin in the air. Barrel roll maneuver. The tip of his nose almost brushed against the chimera's sweeping arm. Huaishi and Old Shao passed by each other. The steel wings cut a deep crack in the black exoskeleton, but cracks also appeared on the wings. The chimera's blood spurted out. and in the midst of the flying blood, countless things that looked like grass seeds suddenly flew into the hurricane, being pulled into the wings by the violent airflow. They instantly expanded, spreading and growing wildly like vines. Even if they were instantly burned by the terrifying temperature, the remaining ashes blocked a few of the vector nozzles. The flames stagnated. In the air, Huaishi's movements shook. Then, he heard the sound of something breaking through the air behind him. Old Zhao's left arm had been raised in front of him at some point. In the palm of his hand, a sharp bone slowly appeared like a harpoon. Then, his left arm exploded with a loud bang. At the last moment, Huaishi saw his arm harden in an instant, as if it had turned into a cannon barrel. From the bottom, blazing flames appeared. The air instantly expanded, pushing the harpoon-like bone and pulling the rope of flesh towards him. Using a harpoon to hit an airplane? Only you could think of that! In the instant of the collision, Huaishi's left wing was pierced by the harpoon, and the barb instantly latched onto it. Then, the contracting rope of flesh pulled the chimera into the air. Fresh meat! As if it had heard the butcher's roar, a black shadow rushed up. It first threw a butcher's mark, then an e-smash, followed by a tendon break. Huaishi's vision instantly turned black. The chimera's knife-like arm had already pierced through his chest, but there was no blood spurting out from the wound. Only a ray of light leaked out. Looking at the sinister smile that was close at hand, Huaishi gritted his teeth, raised his hand, and swung the axe at the chimera's head. "You've been cut into pieces, and you still dare to play the butcher." Huaishi was unable to dodge in midair, so she swung her axe down. More than half of the banshee's head was chopped off. The eyes of petrification, the most threatening part of the banshee's head, as well as the disgusting snake hair, were all chopped off and fell into the blood-red sea below. Huaishi suddenly pulled up the wing. After burning the rope of blood, he threw away the harpoon and began to soar madly upwards, trying to throw the chimera off. But the moment it pounced over, the two tentacles at Lao Zhao's tail had already wrapped tightly around his body. It was as if they had been tied together, and they refused to let go. Instead, they took the opportunity to attack Huaishi fiercely. The Sphinx's teeth suddenly opened and bit down on his neck. Bang! The metal teeth and the axe blade collided and sparks flew. Huaishi sneered. "Fine, you want me to carry you, right? Let's play an Imaman maneuver first." Chapter 155. Between the sea and the sky, the angel spewed out a dazzling golden flash as he galloped madly without any pattern. The angel began to go all out, leaving behind a series of loud explosions. In the long flight, he actually accelerated again. After breaking through Mach 5, the hurricane that rushed at him seemed to have become knives. Sometimes he went up, sometimes he went down, and sometimes he circled or landed without any pattern. Dazzling tactical maneuvers were performed here, but he couldn't get rid of the bastard that stuck to him. He was tightly wrapped around Huaishi's body, and he kept catalyzing all kinds of messy organs to attack Huaishi. In the rapid flight, Huaishi actually couldn't suppress his strange attacks that didn't have any pattern. In an instant there were several holes in his body. The Holy Spirit system was really stingy. They gave him fighter jets, but they weren't willing to give him missiles. If he had a sulfur bow in hand and a few salt arrows, this bastard's head would explode from hundreds of miles away. There wouldn't be so much trouble. "I've already leveled up. Why won't you just obediently die?" Huaishi suddenly did a barrel roll, throwing old Zhao in a big circle in the air. But right after that, the chimera once again rushed up with its tentacles, and its beastly claws and sharp limbs slashed wildly at Huaishi. Sparks of steel kept flying. Huaishi's upward climb finally reached the peak, and he was only a short distance away from the pitch-black clouds. Intuition told him that there was an indescribably terrifying and crazy power hidden behind the clouds. If he rushed in, he definitely wouldn't have a good ending. So, his speed suddenly slowed and he began to fall. And at that moment, he heard old Zhao's cold laughter. Guess, he said softly. Why hasn't your inspector said anything yet? Huai Shi was stunned, and then he awkwardly blocked an attack from a tricky angle. She's about to die, Huai Shi. The chimera laughed proudly. This is all thanks to you. I'm afraid she's already dead, right? I haven't gone over to take a look, but the way he died is really quite tragic. Huai Shi's eyes widened in shock, and he was in a trance for a moment. His facial armor was suddenly cut open by the beast's claw, and his neck was almost bitten off by the sphinx. Are you stupid? Ai Qing's hoarse voice rang in his ears, weak and soft. Are you a pig? Do you believe everything he says? Are you all right? Huai Shi was overjoyed, but then he was puzzled. What's wrong with your voice? Why do you care so much? Ai Qing raised her voice with anger that came out of nowhere. Just don't listen to his nonsense. Are you here to chat with him? In the midst of another collision, countless sparks flew. Huai Shi opened his mouth and took a deep breath. Countless rays of light surged from his mouth. Old Xiao was stunned and subconsciously raised his arm to block in front of him, guarding against the flame that might be spat out next. But then he saw a trace of mockery in Huai Shi's shining eye sockets. Then everything went black. It was as if they had jumped from the 19th floor and hit a marble slab, and they instantly felt the pain and impact of their whole body turning into mud. They had already hit the surface of the sea. Falling from a height of hundreds of meters, the surface of the water was no longer the level of marble, but the hardness of the lazurite fortress. No matter how terrifying their vitality was, under such an impact, they would be severely damaged. But Huai Shi was far more relaxed than him. At the moment of impact, he retracted his wings and hid behind Old Xiao, using his former teammate as a buffer. Even though he was knocked out of his senses and his entire body was wailing from the impact, he still looked unscathed. Unlike Old Xiao, who had turned into a pile of rotten meat. They bounced on the surface of the water, but then Huai Shi forced his wings to move in the midst of pain and dizziness. Flames erupted, taking them up again, down. Just like that, in the roar of the sea surface breaking, they rushed into the bloody deep sea. It was as if they had jumped into a pool of sulfuric acid in an instant. Even the Angel of Authority, who was now no longer human, felt waves of intense pain from the corrosive origin substance. Soaked in the sea water, his steel wings and body were rapidly rusting and disintegrating. What frightened him even more was that the twisted black shadows swimming in the deep sea were ferociously disturbing his countless limbs. Sensing this bit of fire, thousands of tentacles wrapped around him. Huai Shi only felt a bone-piercing chill. The vector nozzle suddenly changed direction and rose up. In an instant it broke out of the sea. But to his regret, even after suffering such heavy injuries, Old Xiao still did not let go of his hand and held on tightly to his wings. Then, he pulled with all his might. Boom! Huai Shi's left wing was pulled with all his strength, and the flames instantly dimmed. Then, a tragic crack appeared. Ignoring Huai Shi's axe that was chopping down, Old Xiao pulled again. A steel wing covered in rust left Huai Shi's body amidst the intense pain. Their flight instantly swayed, and they staggered in midair, turned around, rose, and fell. Finally, in the violent tumble, they smashed crookedly into the body of the ship, which was covered in cracks. Amidst the rumbling, the chimera was finally thrown down and smashed to the ground. Huai Shi staggered and rolled on top of the wreckage. He lay on the ground, panting with difficulty. Suddenly, he felt that he could not breathe. Huai Shi opened his mouth and suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood. He stared at the bloodstains on his hand in astonishment. Now, he should have already become an angel of authority after metal and energy. What surged in his body was light. How could there be blood? When he lowered his head, he saw the bone dagger pierced into his chest. The dagger was hollow. As it ruptured, strands of black sludge were slowly released. They spread out amidst the surging light like a spiderweb, spreading across Huai Shi's chest. It was so familiar. Was that Kush's origin substance? When he was still a vampire, even though he could sense the evil intent surging within it, he had never personally experienced its polluting properties. No matter what, they were all on the same side of the dark creatures. And after he had transformed into an angel of authority, Kush's remaining origin substance displayed a terrifying infectious ability. It was like a nail stuck in his body, obstructing him from within. For a moment, Huaishur actually felt dizzy, as if he had a high fever. He struggled to pull the dagger out of his chest, then raised his hand and used the red-hot axe to burn away the sludge flowing from his chest. Unfortunately, the poison still remained in his body. Panting, the Angel of Authority crawled up from the ground and stared at the chimera slowly walking out of the rubble. "You could even predict this? I told you, Huaishur." Old Shao opened his mouth and spat out a metal weapon from his tail. It was covered in thick glue and a large amount of gastric acid. "I made a lot of preparations. After all, KP was on my side from the very beginning. Ha ha, ha 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 ha." As he laughed proudly, he reached out and tore off the glue on the weapon, revealing an ancient weapon that glowed with traces of copper green. It was a curved sickle. On the blade of the sword, there were still remnants of a golden insignia. It was the open eye of Horus, the last legacy of that useless pharaoh. "You're so heartless." Huaishur sneered indifferently, once again pulling up his heavy silver axe from the ground. "I just can't carry you, and you're so arrogant, my friend." Although he only had one wing left, he could not fly. But if it was just a simple acceleration, he could still do it for the time being. In the blink of an eye, the wooden deck under Huaishur's feet cracked. In the flames of the Vector Sphinx, the last camouflage covering the cruise ship was torn apart, revealing the true appearance of the masts and sailboats riddled with holes. The last of the hanging canvas was torn by the Angel of Heaven's advance. The steel angel broke through the air. Slash! Sword and axe collided. But immediately after, Huaishur pulled out a short knife from behind him and mercilessly stabbed it into the Sphinx's open mouth. Blood splattered everywhere. On the sickle, the runes of the Eye of Horus suddenly trembled. The bronze sickle seemed to lose its physical form in an instant and turned into a gap in the void. From the gap, in the endless light and heat, the eagle-headed god cast an indifferent glance at the mortal world. It was just a glance. Then, he withdrew his gaze without interest. Huaishur felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His vision turned black, and he was almost unable to maintain the state of the Angel of Authority. When the fake oracle encountered the real divine power, it was lucky that he did not explode on the spot. In his momentary weakness, the Sphinx suddenly opened his mouth, crushed the short knife in his mouth, and bit down on Sui Xiong's neck. In an instant, the sharp sound of steel rubbing against each other burst forth. Under the closed teeth, the iron armor of the Angel of Authority cracked, and a dim light lit up from it, as if blood was flowing out. Just as the Sphinx was about to bite off Sui Xiong's neck completely, Huaishur suddenly asked softly, "What is the name of Dad's father?" The Sphinx was stunned. He seemed to be deep in thought. No matter how distant the bloodline was from the ancestor, and how weak his own strength was compared to the original, no matter which Sphinx it was, it could not resist the temptation of puzzles. This was instinct. Even in some history, there were many learned Sphinx who would accompany the pharaoh as sages and make incisive suggestions for his national politic. Unfortunately, for today's idiots who only had their heads left, it took a long time to think about such a simple question. When Sui Xiong forcibly controlled it, it was already a beat too late. The axe in Huaishur's hand had already drawn an arc behind him, and with a twist of his wrist, it slammed into the Sphinx's face. The crack was deep and blood gushed out. The side shook again, but this time Huaishur let go of the axe and clenched his fist. The genuine iron fists burst forth with the sound of steel, and as Huaishur waved them out, there was a roar. "Eat my Babylonian iron fist!" The silver axe did not fall to the ground. A left hook, a right hook, and an uppercut. After executing a full set of Roman martial arts moves, and with the flames spurting out from his wings, a holy iron fist smashed into old Zhao's face. Old Zhao's neck whimpered, and the faint sound of his skull cracking could be heard. Huai Shi had already caught the axe falling from the air, and swept it across, blocking the delayed light on the blade. The eye of Horus opened and then saw nothing, so he closed his eyes again. Huai Shi had already moved forward, his footsteps shattering the deck, and his shoulders slammed forward, knocking the chimera back a step. He raised the silver axe, and holy light burst forth. Then, he slashed at the Sphinx's head. Chapter 156. Cracks spread from the silver axe and the scythe amidst the roar of the collision. The broken axe blade flew out, and the eye of Horus on the scythe also shattered. In that instant old Zhao roared. The two of them threw away the broken weapons in their hands at the same time, raised their fists again, and slammed them together. Amidst the chimera's roar, Huai Shi abruptly dodged the fist that was sweeping towards her. Then, she raised her 5 fingers and jabbed at the chimera's throat, blocking the roar back down. Then, as his wrist contracted, his 5 fingers suddenly clenched into a fist. He charged forward again, smashing the Sphinx's head with a roar. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. This time, the fragile skull could no longer withstand the bombardment of this punch. It shattered with a dull sound, and the last head was about to be destroyed. But right after that, Huai Shi suddenly trembled and bent over involuntarily. She saw the chimera's long tail smashing into her abdomen like a hammer. It was almost as if the chimera's tail was trying to break through steel, causing cracks to spread. He staggered backward and gasped for breath. Then, he and old Zhao pounced forward at the same time. The battle began again. This time, it was no longer a battle between swords and sabers and flying between the sea and the sky, but a face-to-face battle. After discarding all the irrelevant elements, they returned to the realm of beasts. Bones were broken, blood was washed. Every time they collided, stomped their feet, and punched, there would be a roar. The wailing sailboat was constantly shaking and cracking, and thick smoke rose from the burning flames. The ashes fell on the broken armor of the Angel of Authority, and the light in Huai Shi's eyes gradually flickered and dimmed. In the violent battle, the endless power seemed to have been squandered away, and it was difficult to resist the fierce poison of the dark elemental substance. Under the armor, he gradually recovered the senses of flesh and blood. He felt the tearing pain as well as dizziness and fatigue. But the other side was not much better. The 2 eyesore tails had been completely torn off by Huai Shi, and the last head of the Sphinx had been smashed to pieces by Huai Shi. Punches, punches, and punches again. Amidst the rumbling sounds, the Archangel of Power was like a machine that did not know fatigue, forcefully shaking the chimera's torrential winds and torrential rains, before using violence to counter violence with an iron fist. Amidst the dull sound, the exoskeleton in front of the chimera's chest was completely shattered, revealing the devastation within. Old Zhao staggered and took a step back. However, Huai Shi continued to advance. Once again, he raised his fist and smashed out. Bang! Come on! Huai Shi roared and stepped forward, pressing forward step by step. He waved his hand to wipe away the blood on the back of his hand and clenched it again. The sound of steel rubbing against each other was so ferocious. Haven't you made a lot of preparations? Take it out, old Zhao. Let's see how you can win. Ha 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 ha. The chimera seemed to be amused by Huai Shi's words. It clutched its stomach and laughed, unable to contain its joy. Even if Huai Shi pulled him up and punched him again and again, smashing him into the ruins of the bridge. You really, bang? He suddenly reached out and grabbed Huai Shi's iron fist. He slowly clenched his fist and smiled savagely. You don't know anything. A loud explosion rang out. As the beast's arms danced, Huai Shi was pulled into the air. He smashed through the floorboards and fell into the lower level of the cabin. Immediately afterwards, however, the chimera raised its foot and stomped down on his face. Huaishur rolled, dodged, and crawled to his feet, panting violently. He felt waves of dizziness, and his vision darkened. However, what made him uneasy was Ai Qing's silence and the burning pain in his skull. This was the punishment for breaking his oath. Even though the chains on his body had been shattered, the principles and commandments of the origin substance still existed. At this moment, as he weakened, they appeared once again, tormenting his soul. Like cold steel, they struck him again and again, shaking his consciousness and causing his vision to darken. Guess, Huaishur! Old Shao roared and swung his fist, sending him flying. Guess why Yaka went crazy? Huaishur retreated, his feet leaving 2 deep marks on the broken deck. Guess! He roared angrily again. When Ko Sish felt that he was about to die, he went crazy and tried to kill an entire ship of people? Boom! Huaishur was smashed into the wall. Guess again, why? The more people die on this ship, the faster it will die. He laughed savagely, then raised his foot and kicked forward. A terrifying force burst forth, causing Huaishur to break through several layers of the cabin's floorboards and be wedged into the wall. Finally, guess! He slowly bent down and picked up Huaishur's broken axe from the ground. He staggered forward with a malicious and ferocious smile on his face. It's only been a night's journey, but why haven't we seen the so-called New World yet? Old Shao looked down at Huaishur's broken face and shook his head in disappointment. He slowly raised the axe and swung it down. The blade of the axe stopped abruptly in front of Huaishur's eyes. The end of the handle was suddenly grasped by a hand, unable to move an inch forward. You're using my axe to chop me? Huaishur slowly raised his head and stared at the hideous face. Who gave you the confidence? The sound of steel rubbing against each other burst forth. The blade of the axe retreated. Upwards. It moved away inch by inch between Huaishur's raised fingers. In his dizziness and pain, Huaishur roared. He suddenly raised his hand, clenched it, and smashed it into old Zhao's face. Then, he punched again and again, until that broken face was smashed into a bloody mess by him. Finally, he clenched his fist with all his might. He swung it. With a roar, the chimera flew out. After smashing through the cabin, it landed on the deck, which was riddled with holes, and fell into the flames. Huaishur gasped for breath as she crawled up from the ground. Dragging her axe, she climbed up step by step and crawled out. In the end, he saw the enemy lying on the ground. It seemed that he had no strength left. He leaned against the broken rail and opened his eyes with difficulty. He looked at Huaishur, who was walking towards him step by step. For some reason, he couldn't help but laugh hoarsely. "Did you think of a joke?" Huaishur asked indifferently. "Why don't you say it so that everyone can listen to it? Isn't the one in front of me a joke?" Old Shao panted and smiled mockingly at him. "How ironic, Huaishur. It was destined from the beginning. Only you can't win. Ha 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 ha," he said. "You can kill me, but you can't escape that curse." In his dizziness, Huaishur felt a sharp pain in his head. He staggered and gritted his teeth angrily. He stepped forward and asked hoarsely, "A ridiculous joke? Are these your last words? Is that so?" Old Shao raised his head and spat out a mouthful of black blood. He sneered. "Do you want to make it clearer, Huaishur? Or why don't you ask Ai Qing?" Ai Qing didn't say anything. She lowered her eyes. "Do you see?" Old Shao sneered. "You're the only one who is kept in the dark. No, there's one more." He stared maliciously at the pale girl behind Huaishur. "Give up, Huaishur." Old Shao shook his head and said mockingly, "No matter how hard you struggle, you can't change the final result. Is it because my question is not simple enough, or you don't want to get the result from thinking? It was destined from the beginning." He laughed out loud. "On this ship, there can only be one person who can reach the new world. This was the truth behind Ai Qing's silence. The gods finally made a contract in the struggle and made a compromise after all kinds of intense or secret probing. The gods could cruelly punish these traitors, and the White Crown King was not generous. He didn't want homeless dogs and frustrated losers who only knew how to tuck their tails between their legs. The obstacles and curses of the gods were exactly what he wanted. Only in such a cruel and cold way could the fugitives completely extinguish their unrealistic delusions and face the cold reality and the tragic battle. From the beginning, this ship was not the ideal home of the fugitives. It was a big cauldron that smelted the miraculous gold from the dregs and waste. He would choose one winner from 100 losers. He would choose a true powerhouse from the countless abandoned dust. He would choose someone who could truly help him accomplish his great cause. This was the curse and blessing of the White Crown King. Among all the sinners on this ship, only one person would be pardoned by the White Crown King. Only one. When the Mayflower set sail, the final result was already destined. Nothing could be avoided. Everything that happened later was just a step toward the predetermined ending. It was just to welcome the final winner. At the moment of realization, Huaishur felt a sharp pain in his skull like erupting lava. He almost couldn't stand still. Violent waves reverberated in his source substance. It was as if an iron pen fell, engraving an order that couldn't be disobeyed in his soul stroke by stroke. It made him tremble and roar tragically. Do you finally understand? Huaishur. Then, finally, let's guess. He laughed strangely and whispered softly, whose philosopher's stone recorded this part of history? At that moment, Huaishur roared and slashed down with his axe. It completely chopped off his dog's head. The broken head rolled on the ground, and the last mocking smile still remained. Everything of Paracelsus will be buried here. The broken head raised its eyes from the blood, and its lips opened and closed silently. It stared pitifully at Huaishur and Lily in front of it. She died in your hands. Abraham Van Helsing, don't forget, this is your mission. He closed his eyes. Under the blade of Huaishur's axe, it fell apart. In the gradually cold hand of the corpse, the 5 fingers slowly spread out, revealing the scratched wanderer coin. On the coin, the holy statue of the archangel stared indifferently at Huaishur's face with a mocking smile. Huaishur fell to the ground powerlessly, no longer able to hold the axe. Countless voices echoed in his ears, like thunder or soft whispers. The voices of thousands of people overlapped in his consciousness, giving him a mission that couldn't be disobeyed. Kill Paracelsus. Kill Lily. This was the mission that Van Helsing had to complete. This was the ending left in the Philosopher's Stone. This was everything that you had done with your own hands. At that moment, Huaishur came to a realization from the pain of his soul being torn apart. He couldn't help but laugh. He laughed at himself. When he tried his best to pick up the gun on the ground and slowly got up from the ground, his eyes became unfamiliar. It was as if he had woken up from a long dream. Lily stared at him blankly for a long, long time. She seemed to finally understand something, but her pale face still had a sad confusion. So, you came to kill me, Huaishur? Yes. Huaishur nodded, enduring the pain in his skull, and his face gradually became ferocious. He slowly raised the pistol. He aimed at the girl's face. It shattered her last hope, and she couldn't hold back her tears. Why on earth? She choked and shouted, I just want to live. Huaishur didn't answer. He just stared silently at her crying face. After a long time, he sighed softly. Yes, why is it so difficult to just want a happy life? He said, probably, this world is like this. From the beginning, it was shrouded in the shadow of hell. Freedom was just a fleeting illusion, and the humble life was the currency at the fingertips of the gods. In such a world, how could there be any happiness to pursue? Huaishur's eyes drooped as she felt something within her body crumbling apart. Sorry I lied to you, he murmured softly. This was his final farewell and apology. Since this game was destined to end from the very beginning, it was time for it to end. Thus, the warmth of the past was no longer there. Huaishur pulled the trigger. Chapter 157. At that moment everything was silent. Then, a violent roar engulfed everything. When the roar dissipated, Huaishur lowered his eyes and saw the blood on the ground, the dagger in his chest, and the crying Lily. "Oh, I missed. What a pity!" Staring at the stunned face, Huaishur raised her eyebrows in delight. She chuckled softly as if regretfully and lowered her eyes. He knelt on the ground powerlessly. Lily looked at him blankly, as if she wanted to say something. Blood fell on her face. Her lips opened, but she couldn't speak. "I'm sorry, I can't accompany you on your trip." Huaishur leaned on her shoulder, panted, and whispered softly. Lily looked at him blankly and couldn't help but wail. She reached out, wanting to save him, but Huaishur held her hand tightly. It was deadly. Huaishur raised his head, looked at her face, and forced her to look into his eyes. "Listen to me, Lily, from today onwards, you have to learn to be alone." He tried his best to breathe and told her, "When you arrive in the new world, you have to start living alone, working alone, and traveling alone. You will embrace your own fate and future, face the storms of the future alone, and in the end, you may die quietly alone. But you can't be afraid, and you can't run away." Huaishur stroked the girl's cheek, stared at her crying eyes, and whispered, "Because you are not alone, so you have to have courage." He slowly raised his hand and gently hugged Lily's shoulder, using all his strength. "Goodbye, Lily." He said goodbye. "Goodbye, my friend. Thank you for your company. Thank you for everything you did for me. Thank you for the hug." When he raised his eyes, he saw the broken dark clouds in the sky, as well as the twinkling stars under the bright moon. The blood color of the quiet sea dissipated, and a gentle and warm fresh wind came out. At the end of the sea, the outline of the continent and the mountains faintly appeared. Their trip had arrived at the main point. The short journey was about to come to an end. He smiled, closed his eyes, and exhaled his last breath. "I wish you a safe journey." "Why didn't you stop him?" KP looked down at the final scene and sighed softly. "I thought you would at least let him kill the girl. After all, this is just a game." "Yes, this is just a game." Ai Qing calmly lit the cigarette in the corner of her mouth. "Unfortunately, I prefer this ending." As she spoke, she replaced Huaishur and raised her middle finger at KP, telling him one word at a time, "You're the one who's going to die. F***ck your game." KP calmly accepted the anger and contempt from Ai Qing and Huaishur. He calmly closed the rule book in his hand, took off the glasses on his face, and shook his head slightly. "Should I say that it's inconceivable or natural? You actually made the same choice as in the previous round. If the first time was a coincidence, then the second time can't be described as a coincidence." He paused for a moment and nodded solemnly to Ai Qing. "Your determination and will are admirable, Ms. Ai. Your respect for the story also surprised me. I have to admit that I underestimated you. Can such beautiful words change the ending?" Ai Qing stubbed out the cigarette and looked up at him. "If you want to do something, do it quickly. Don't think about listening to me beg for mercy." "No, I think you misunderstood something." KP stared at the screen in the game and smiled. "The game is not over yet. After all, everything that has happened now is not allowed by someone." At his fingertips, a chess piece overflowing with deep blood color appeared and was slowly placed on the table. At that moment, in the darkness, a cold eye opened. Ending error fallacy in the third branch, deviation in the logical direction, begin correction. Correction failed. Problem report uploaded. Central core analysis begins. Analysis complete, beginning correction. Thus, time stopped abruptly in an instant. In the darkness of death, Huaishur opened her eyes and heard countless roars and shouts. In the end, they turned into a thunderous roar that exploded in her soul. Rebellion! 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 As if there was a substantial thunder falling from the sky, it penetrated his soul. Some kind of rigid and resolute power operated in his consciousness and began to search for the seeds of rebellion and correct the wrong thoughts. Everything that had happened now was reversed and together with time. At that moment, Huaishur opened his eyes in severe pain and peeked into the depths of the layers of darkness. There was a thin figure standing in the darkness with a pair of blood-red eyes. It was so familiar. It was the Philosopher's Stone that recorded all of this, the memories left by the former Van Helsing. In the original history, Van Helsing chose to kill the woman who trusted him and successfully passed the test to reach the New World. In the end, he joined the American genealogy and became a shameful traitor. In the silence, KP slowly said, after 270 years, he almost exiled himself and devoted himself to the cause of opening up hell. Even when he advanced to the Fifth Order Blue Crown Dragon, he never returned to the present realm, as if he was escaping something. Until he died of old age in the 21st level of hell, there was not a day when he did not regret the choice he made that day. There was not a day when he did not repent for that pure and sad soul. This is the original sin he committed in order to be reborn, an unchangeable fact. He lowered his eyes in pity and sighed softly. Just like that, with deep regret, he died, leaving this record in the Philosopher's Stone. So, I'm sorry, Ms. AI. He slowly shook his head. This is the established history, the destined fate of him and her, the determined ending of this story. The remorse and sorrow of countless times in the past was now only a remnant of a huge obsession. It forgot why it existed and what had happened in the past. It was just like a machine, repeating everything in the past over and over again, witnessing this eternal original sin. It was because of this that no change was allowed, and all the endings could not be forgiven for being destroyed. Kill Paracelsus. The vampire stared at Huaishur's eyes, and a violent power poured into his soul. The huge will shook in the void and burst out with blazing electric light, changing Huaishur's will inch by inch. Complete your mission. A thunderous roar of rage reverberated in his soul. Kill her and obtain your redemption. *CK your redemption. At that moment, Huaishur raised his eyes from the turmoil of his soul, even though his eyes had been scorched by the crazy electric light and were spewing out flames. The modification of the will came to an abrupt end. In front of the thick book, countless huge wills collapsed like waves crashing on a reef. Huaishur roared angrily. She went against the imposing gaze coming from the darkness and moved forward. He stretched out his hand and suddenly stuck it in the darkness. It was as if he was pulling back time, causing the reverse time to stagnate. The record shook, but then it came to an abrupt end. It was forced into a stagnation under his will. Huaishur reached out and pulled up the vampire's collar. His charred eyes stared at the vampire's empty face and told him word by word, "I don't want this kind of redemption." The vampire's illusion shattered with a loud bang. "You're going to lose, KP." At that moment, at the front of the audience, Crow calmly made the final judgment. KP looked up in astonishment and saw the cracks on the chess piece. This was a contradiction from the inside out, and it was also an incredible discovery. Van Helsing's record was defying his Philosopher's Stone? His history was defying his will. This story abandoned its original master. Then, it chose a new protagonist and stood beside Huaishur. Then, the earth shook, the world roared, and everything that had stagnated began to move in a new direction, toward a new ending. Resisting the will that was constantly exerting heavy pressure, resisting the power of the Philosopher's Stone. Boom! Huaishur's soul shook violently and cracks appeared. He stretched out his hand and suddenly pierced into the void. He found the original ending from the countless broken records and suddenly clenched it as if he was holding a piece of red-hot iron. He didn't care that his soul was collapsing. Then, he saw the girl who had fallen in a pool of blood due to her destined fate, and her eyes that slowly closed in sorrow. She was dead. Such an ending, Huai Shi announced hoarsely. I won't allow it. Even if this was real history. Even if all of this could no longer be changed, even if it was a dream, in all of this fiction, there should be a place for her in this world. Then, under KP's stunned expression, he roared and completely tore the original ending to shreds, together with layers of darkness. He pulled open a crack in the countless records and glimpsed the enormous will that operated behind them. It shook angrily and set off a howling counterattack. And Huai Shi, in a daze, stretched out his hand and tightly grasped the void in front of him. Then, a metallic light burst forth from his fingertips. The light, as sharp as the stars, gathered in his hand and multiplied inch by inch. In an instant, it formed a slender and ferocious cross-shaped spear. Surging origin substance flowed on its blade, interweaving into a gorgeous and complicated pattern. With his command, it burst forth with the brilliance of the scorching sun. From the darkness, Huai Shi stepped forward, raised his arm, and stabbed out with a soundless roar. With this attack, the final ending was decided. Let the dust settle. Bang. A dream, an illusion, a bubble. Everything dissipated. In a daze, Huai Shi heard the sound of something shattering. When countless lights and shadows flitted past in front of him, he had already returned to the cabin that seemed familiar to him. His hand held the slender iron, still maintaining the posture of a lunge. In front of him, in the open safe, the philosopher's stone that was as resplendent as a dream had already been pierced through by the spear's blade. Light green blood flowed out from the enormous crystal-like pupil. The crack spread. The philosopher's stone silently shattered. In the deathly stillness, Huai Shi forced a smile and fell to the ground. He was unconscious. In a daze, he seemed to have heard the sound of something shattering. In the deep night, the swaying lifeboat drifted between the waves. Lily turned her head in astonishment, searching for the source of the sound. There, the sailboat that was riddled with holes was swallowed up by the flames, gradually sinking into the turbulent waves. But at a certain moment, she seemed to see the shadow of a youth at the bow of the boat. He happily waved goodbye to her, turned around, and walked into the rising flames. He disappeared. Only the faint sound of a cello could be heard from the flames. It was gentle and low, dancing under the waves and starlight. It was as beautiful as the creation of a soul. Huai Shi, the girl stared blankly at the gradually extinguishing flames. After a long, long time, she weakly curled up on the boat and cried. Just like a newborn baby. In the distance, the faint light of dawn shone, illuminating the land of the new continent. Her life had officially begun. Chapter 158. In KP's silence, the game came to an end. A thick book jumped out from the light and opened in front of him and Crow. Countless pages flipped and finally stopped at the blank space at the end of the scroll. A silver feather pen jumped on the page, ignoring KP's astonishment, and left a line of dark words, announcing the end. False end, empty ending. No person survived. KP looked down at the line of words and was stunned. Oh, really, isn't that too rude? Crow laughed happily. Not long ago, I felt that this child had the potential to become a villain. I didn't expect him to improve so quickly. As she spoke, she raised her eyes and stared at her former colleagues in front of her. So, how do you feel, host? She asked softly. Is my clerk still worthy of your attention? Is he the kind of recorder you are looking for? Is he someone who can treat the past and the future equally, adjudicate record and reality, and balance fiction and truth? Wonderful, KP whispered softly. I mean wonderful. He finally raised his eyes, but there was no annoyance or unhappiness in them. Instead, they were full of surprise and excitement, sparkling. Wonderful! This is a legendary performance. Legendary! Behind him, a woman in a black robe appeared. She nodded slightly, but did not hide her admiration, a hero destined by the heavens. On the other empty chair beside the table, an old man with a solemn face raised his deep eyes and said in a low voice, "What an admirable feat!" Thus, Crow nodded in satisfaction and rubbed her little wings. "Then, let's discuss the next thing. For example, compensation?" When Huaishur opened his eyes from his drowsiness, he felt as if he was going to die from exhaustion. It was as uncomfortable as being beaten up by 100,000 people after running 100,000 marathons with a hangover. Who am I? Where am I? What happened? Then, he saw old Shaw grinning in front of him. "Not bad, kid." The rough man patted him on the shoulder. "Not bad." Huaishur jumped out of bed in fright and almost knocked over the 4-drip hanging on his body. He almost lost control and chopped down with his axe. Wake up, wake up. It's all over." Old Shao coughed awkwardly and turned to look at his supervisor, the smiling old man. "What are you waiting for? Come and explain yourself. Look at what you've done in my face." "If I had known, I wouldn't have come." "What happened?" Huaishur was dumbfounded. He saw Ai Qing sitting at the table with a gloomy face, and KP, who was smiling and playing dice across the table. Cough, cough. To put it simply, this is an impromptu inspection. The old inspector coughed twice and said, "Under Mr. KP's suggestion, we will use the recovery of the Philosopher's Stone as a test." "What?" Huaishur was dumbfounded. "This was all arranged by you? Although there were some unpleasant accidents, some of them." Yes." The old inspector, who played the role of old Shao in the module, smiled awkwardly and reached out his hand. "Please forgive us for offending you." Huaishur was dumbfounded. He looked at Ai Qing, trying to figure out what was going on. Ai Qing's expression was still ugly. To put it simply, the operation was a test from the beginning. Both of us were played in circles. Even the examiner himself almost failed. "Don't say that, Miss Ai. Although there were many accidents, this is still an inspection for you and Mr. Huai." The old inspector coughed awkwardly and looked away. "What accident?" "It's a long story." The old inspector pondered for a moment and sighed helplessly. "In fact, at the beginning, there was no module or game. According to the original plan, everyone raided the smuggler's cargo ship. Wu Shuang had a great time, but no one expected that when they were about to successfully recover the Philosopher's Stone fragment, a traitor would suddenly stab them in the back. Lei Feizhou. Under the instructions of his inspector, they were prepared to steal the Philosopher's Stone fragment and run away, hiding at the border to dispose of the stolen goods. In the beginning, the stab went very smoothly, until they tried to stab Huaishur in the back. Things went wrong. According to the inspector's description, Huaishur, who understood the situation, displayed a terrifying reaction speed. Relying on his killing skills, he fought guerrilla warfare on the ship, displaying a terrifying combat strength beyond imagination. In a short 15 minutes, Lei Feizhou and the 4 ascendant companions he had contacted were all dealt with as easily as chopping vegetables. In the end, Lei Feizhou was driven to desperation and directly activated the Philosopher's Stone fragment, triggering a large-scale corrosion phenomenon, leading to unknown consequences. Helpless, KP could only use some method to forcibly erase this incident and start over. This was the first cycle. However, the Philosopher's Stone fragment had already completely corroded the surroundings, turning the ship and the surrounding area into an ever-expanding hell. The difficulty of recovery soared to a terrifying level, and the second cycle of recovery failed. The Astronomy Association had no choice but to agree with KP's suggestion, covering the area with the dark net border, forcibly modularizing everything, and then started the third cycle. The scheming and fighting of this story could easily fill up 200,000 words in the Book of Destiny. Huaishur felt extremely regretful after hearing it. Why was it omitted? However, he still felt that there was something wrong. When he subconsciously looked at KP KP only smiled mysteriously and didn't say anything. Instead, KP secretly winked at him when no one was paying attention. After explaining to Huaishur, the old inspector said seriously, "Madam AI, during the inspection, you have shown the qualities of an inspector. You have a keen sense of thinking and smell, as well as the deep trust between you and your colleagues, as well as the calmness and decisiveness in the face of adversity. The Central Administration praised your performance and approved your promotion application, and once again invited you to join the Central Decision-Making Conference. I already said I refuse." AI Ching indifferently interrupted him. "Cut the crap. I hope we'll meet again at the internal meeting." "Okay, I hope you'll be merciful at that time." The old inspector smiled helplessly and looked at Huaishur seriously. "As for you, Mr. Huai, you've successfully completed the mission I expected to be impossible. Moreover, you have the integrity and outstanding skills that are rarely seen in this era. Although your thinking is a bit simple, and you have a tendency to be overly violent, this can't hide your outstanding talent. The Astronomy Association is proud to have an operation member like you. This is your official certificate. We will complete the registration later. If you have time in the next few months, you can come to Jinling to register." In the corner, Yin Yen snorted in disdain. When he noticed Huaishur's gaze, he unhappily retracted his gaze. He continued to shrink. "Mr. Yin Yen has been temporarily disqualified as an inspector because of his behavior of endangering colleagues during the operation. Your inquiry will be held in Jinling later. Please pay attention to the notice." The old inspector shook his head in pity. After filling out the form in his hand, he handed Huaishur a new certificate. "Then, my mission is complete." He put away the things in his hands with a smile and bid farewell to the others. Soon, only he and AI Ching were left in the room. "I was completely fooled." AI Ching sighed unwillingly. She tapped on the armrest with a gloomy expression and closed her eyes. In the silence, Huaishur awkwardly coughed twice. AI Ching, yeah?" AI Ching looked up at him. She was still angry. Thank you. Although I don't know what you encountered, I really have to thank you." Huaishur solemnly nodded and thanked her. "Isn't it the job of an inspector to leave the operation to the subordinates and bear the consequences yourself?" AI Ching looked at him and looked away with disinterest. "I'm going out to get some fresh air. You have a good rest. A boat will pick us up later." "Okay." Before leaving, AI Ching's wheelchair paused for a moment. She was silent for a long time before she sighed helplessly. She turned around and said, "You did a good job." "Yeah?" Without explaining anything, AI Ching pushed the door open and left him alone in the room. In the silence, Huaishur turned around and saw KP, who had reappeared behind the table. "You're leaving already?" KP raised his eyebrows, shook his head and sighed. "What a straightforward girl. It must be hard to have such a boss." "Actually, it's okay." Huaishur scratched his head and looked at him awkwardly. After a long time, he couldn't help but ask, was it really just a test? It was a part of it. At least that's what they thought. KP shrugged. "Don't worry. They just hitched a ride. I kept the key parts a secret for you." Thank you." Huaishur nodded and looked at the small box on the table in front of him. The transparent box contained a broken crystal ball. It was exquisitely carved like an eye. That was the fragment of the Philosopher's Stone. Unfortunately, more than half of the miracles in it had been lost. It was no longer useful. Don't worry about it. Anyway, it was mostly consumed to maintain that module. Compared to what we gained, what we lost is not worth mentioning. KP comforted him understandingly. Then he raised his eyebrows and clapped his hands happily. "Then, as good friends of the investigator, we will enter the stage of the day after tomorrow and the stage of growth. Although you didn't successfully clear the module, you completed an unexpected ending. As the master of this game, I must give you a reward." "There's a reward." Huaishir was stunned. Of course, KP said matter-of-factly. The original reward for clearing the module was this character card. As long as you have enough source substance, you can transform into Van Helsing's character again for a short time. But to be honest, I feel that this meager reward can't recognize everything you've done. As he spoke, he tore Van Helsing's character card into pieces without any hesitation. What the hell? Wait a minute. Huaishir was dumbfounded. He originally wanted to say that it didn't matter and that he didn't mind if KP quickly gave it to him, but he didn't expect KP to act so quickly. That was a border relic that, as long as there was enough source substance, would allow a person to instantly transform into a peak stage 3 ascendant. And it was only one step away from becoming an angel of authority. In other words, as long as Huaishir had enough, he could transform into a holy light fighter at any time. How could he tear it apart just like that? Anyway, let's put this matter aside for now. Let's roll the screen reward first. KP took out a thick rulebook and explained the meaning to Huaishir. It seemed that in this game, as long as a player completed a module, his character would be able to grow and obtain a skill reward. But according to KP, this reward could actually be placed directly on him? A free skill upgrade. Huaishir's eyes lit up with excitement. Following KP's guidance, he began to roll the die for judgment. Soon, his face became incomparably dark, and he was lost in the blue sky of Africa, dumbfounded. Bluff, persuasion, and stealth. These were skills that had been successful in the module, but one by one they had failed to grow. After rolling around, only the most basic listen and detect were upgraded. Soon, as the die rolled, Huaishir only felt his eyes light up, and the world seemed to instantly become much clearer. Countless tiny traces that he had overlooked were vivid in front of his eyes, and his ears could even hear the rustling of the clothes of those people outside the cabin, as well as the low echoes of the surging waves like a symphony. His perception, which had been raised to the limit by the ghost, actually increased by a large margin. Just this alone was a pleasant surprise. But then, when he rolled the die for the last time, a large amount of knowledge unexpectedly emerged in his mind, about the properties of various metals, the methods to process them, and the details to pay attention to in each process. Originally, he had only memorized the information and knowledge from so many books, but at this moment, he had unexpectedly mastered it through a comprehensive study. And the various details and key points mentioned by Crow when he was teaching were also vivid in his mind. Alchemy's growth test passed. In an instant, he had gone through a long period of repeatedly memorizing, unceasingly and futilely trying and experimenting to slowly master the stage, and he had officially become a beginner. When he raised his palm and focused his mind, he glimpsed countless fine metal fragments floating in the air above his palm. The pure white alchemy fire rose up, the temperature flexibly changing, quickly melting, refining, purifying, extracting, and even synthesizing them, until finally it turned into a surging silver-white liquid. A small miracle had happened. Silver blood potion. Although the potion's effect was slightly weak, Huaishir had already skipped the long period of apprenticeship in one fell swoop, only relying on his hands to complete the results that were previously unreachable. Just when he was pleasantly surprised, he heard KP excitedly snap his fingers in contemplation. It was like a flash of inspiration. "I got it!" KP happily raised his eyes. "This is the most suitable reward for you." Just when Huaishir raised his head in amazement, he saw KP stretch out his hand towards him from afar, as if he had grabbed something and pulled it back. Huaishir's brain suddenly buzzed, as if something had been pulled out from his soul by KP. When he raised his eyes to look, he found that KP had a gorgeous cross-shaped spear in his hand. The silver-white spear blade was engraved with layers of complicated emblems, exquisite and solemn, as if it had gathered all the light in the world. The Spear of Compassion? KP lowered his head and stared at the inscriptions on the spear, nodding in admiration. Good name. As he said that, he reached out and picked up the fragment of the Philosopher's Stone on the table, the repenting eye that once belonged to the Fifth Order Sublimator, Blue Crown Dragon Van Helsing. The crystal eye in his hand turned into a stream of light, adhering to the spear blade. It illuminated KP's smile. Let's use this to commemorate your dragon-slaying feat. At that moment, the light dissipated from the spear blade, and on the silver-white blade, there was an additional trace of blood that had yet to dry. The seemingly endless blood of the azure crowned dragon slowly dripped from the tip of the spear and landed on the ground. The ground silently decayed, and soon after, pure white irises bloomed from the decaying ground. It emitted a refreshing fragrance. Defeating evil, subverting fate, and saving the princess trapped in the endless cycle of death, your actions are the embodiment of glory. KP smiled, looking at the magnificent spear. From 1620 to now, such a long time has been pierced through by this spear. This is the proof of an immortal legend. As he said that, he turned the spear around, elegantly and solemnly holding it in front of Huaishur. Huaishur slowly reached out and held the handle of the spear. With a thought, the gorgeous cross-shaped spear shrunk inch by inch, turning into an ancient book in his hand. When he lowered his head to look at it, he saw the ancient title on the cover that had weathered the passage of time. 400 years of shock, he was stunned. KP. With the last glimmer of hope, he stared at the man in front of him. Is Lily really still alive? Who knows? KP smiled mysteriously. The life and death of a human is like morning dew and bubbles, and the life and death of an android is even more illusory. Moreover, isn't she a person who won't appear in the world? An illusory life, an ethereal death, it is difficult to define. But is that real, or is reality and illusion really that important? KP said calmly. I believe that no matter what it is, you will treat it equally, always the same, and that is enough. I am sincerely grateful for your tolerance and generosity. As he said that, he took a step back and took off his hat and coat from the shelf next to him. Then, Mr. Huaishur, allow me to say goodbye here. KP bowed solemnly. I sincerely hope that one day you and Miss Lily can meet again in this dreamlike world. He paused for a moment and smiled meaningfully. Until then, please wait and hope. In the silence, KP turned and left. The door closed. Huaishur looked at the ancient book in his hand in a daze. Is this the end of the story? Maybe. Chapter 159. 400 years ago, in the New World. Under the gloomy sky, a dim light shone through the gaps between the clouds, illuminating the gray waves in front of the reef. Countless sharp reefs protruded from the shore into the sky in a disorderly manner. They were as sharp as blades, cutting the waves that surged up again and again. Broken rails and charred sails floated up from the broken waves. Countless pieces of debris washed up to the shore, half buried in the sand. More were taken away by the waves again. They disappeared into the deep sea. In the silence, there was a thin figure standing quietly on the shore. Like a stone statue waiting silently. It was difficult to see his face, because his face was too handsome, and the light of the world could not illuminate it. He did not know how to look at the robe on his body, because the robe was too solemn, and his eyes could not bear it. The only thing generously revealed between the sea and the sky was the cold and solemn white crown on his head. It was like the truth, like a miracle, like everything inconceivable. It existed here, and it was real. Then everything was like a dream, and it was difficult to show one's substance in front of it. One could only admit one's insignificance and humility. In this seemingly eternal wait, the lonely king of the White Crown stood silently on the edge of the sea, quietly staring into the distance, watching countless ships sailing in the stormy waves, countless people chanting their names, countless people shouting in despair or piously praying. But he did not help them because of their piety, nor did he punish them because of their rebellion and arrogance. He just waited. Amidst the murky waves, a few broken sampans staggered forward and crawled pathetically to the shore. The victims soaked in the water were pale, holding the reef in front of them with difficulty, crawling on the sharp edge, letting their bodies be cut, gasping for breath. They looked sadly behind them. The huge fleet stopped on the surface of the sea, the raging fire burning vigorously, and tragic screams and wails could be heard. After a long, long time, they all sank to the point where they were only one step away from salvation. The old survivors lowered their heads, and tears flowed down their faces behind mottled white hair, but they did not dare to look. Instead, they lowered their heads and knelt in the turbid waves, kowtowing piously, crawling forward inch by inch, at the feet of the Supreme Existence. Please have mercy, the Supreme King of the White Crown. The tearful guide raised his head and prayed for the god's mercy. So, the King of the White Crown looked down, but there was no fluctuation in his calm eyes. Peter of the Campbell clan, Simon of the Russell clan, Garcia of the Jackson clan, Haywood of the Cape clan. At this point, he pointed out the names of those who had bowed their heads one by one. The Supreme Existence then softly asked, "Why have you come?" "To have an audience and pay tribute." The old man kowtowed again, and his tears fell into the gravel, dissolving silently. We want to offer you everything we have. Great Supreme King, we came with our entire clan and gave everything, but now, other than the traitor Helsing clan, who has become the god's lackey, our 16 vampire clans, hundreds of elites and thousands of clansmen, the wealth and family property that we have accumulated for thousands of years, everything has been buried in this cold storm under the god's wrath, he said. Now, other than the lives of the 14 of us, we have nothing to offer you. In the silence, the King of the White Crown listened indifferently, but he did not speak. Only the old men trembled and knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging humbly. Until he spoke, "Then offer sacrifice." The guide was stunned, and then, as if he had been granted amnesty, he turned around and waved behind him. Then, someone went forward on his knees, holding a small swaddling cloth, and placed the sleeping baby at the feet of the King of Pure White. In his deep sleep, the small baby sucked his fingers sweetly, as if he was immersed in a beautiful dream. The old men raised their heads expectantly, looking up at the King of the White Crown's face, ignoring the cold majesty that stung their eyes, and tears of blood slowly flowed down. After a long time, the King of the White Crown nodded slightly, "Yes." Then, the old men laughed, as if they had been released, and respectfully kowtowed before the Supreme King, praising his kindness and grace. The guide at the front took out a sharp knife from his arms, raised it devoutly, and pierced it into his own chest. Blood flowed out. He closed his eyes in satisfaction, handed the handle of the knife to the person behind him, and then silently turned into ashes. Then, the second old man came forward, knelt, offered his blood, and disappeared in the wind. One after another. In the end, the old woman pierced the blood-soaked knife into her heart, but the merciless death did not come. She was stunned for a moment, and then stabbed again in fear, but her life continued. "Don't be afraid, I have accepted your sacrifice," the King of the White Crown calmly instructed. "One day, I will collect it from you, but not now," he said. "You have a more important mission, you have to continue to exist." "It is my honor. Please give me your enlightenment." In such a gift and generosity, the old woman shed tears of gratitude, kowtowed devoutly, and waited for the king's edict. "Take this child to the east," the King of the White Crown said. The White Crown King said, "Go to the place where the golden bull stands. That is the promised land that I gave you. You have to raise him, tell him the sacrifice and piety you have offered today, and also tell him that the old blood has flowed out today, but new blood will multiply endlessly, because in the future, the blood of the whole world will come here. You have lost your people, but new people will be born. The wealth you have lost today, you will gain 10,000 times or more in the future." The King of the White Crown declared, "This is my agreement with you, go and engrave it on the stone foundation of the Golden Bull. As long as the Golden Bull exists, your prosperity will be indestructible." So, in the midst of the devout praise, the old woman picked up the baby, kowtowed, and walked towards the east. She disappeared into the wilderness. Everything returned to silence. But the long wait continued on. Countless people came, countless people kowtowed, and countless people left with redemption. From beginning to end, the King of the White Crown calmly witnessed everything. Until a long time later, in the fog on the distant sea, a small lifeboat drifted over, carrying the girl who should not have existed. On that illusory face, the King of the White Crown's eyes seemed to look up, and then he understood. "A new branch of the matter?" He commented indifferently. "You have created a fantasy that should never have appeared, and deliberately created a future that should not have existed. Whose arrangement is this?" Behind him, 3 figures appeared. An old man, a woman in black, and a middle-aged man with glasses, who should not have existed here, bowed with their hands on their chests, and paid their respects to the King of the White Crown. The King of the White Crown glanced at them indifferently, and his tone became mocking. "DM? What could be gained from endless risks and staking everything on a single bet? Utopia?" The old man's face was calm and his eyes were lowered. "St. Can the eternal darkness and the undercurrent struggle lead to a bright future in scheming?" The woman in the black robe did not speak, and her smile did not change. "KP, what are you pursuing? Knowledge beyond human knowledge? Wisdom beyond human wisdom?" The King of the White Crown easily saw through the nature of the newcomers, and his arrogance was not concealed. Knowledge beyond human knowledge is no inspiration to humans, and wisdom beyond human wisdom is useless to humans. When courage is exhausted, there is nothing at the end of fear. What you seek is an illusion, and what you get is only nothingness. The so-called kingdom of heaven is such a meaningless place. But this is our mission, isn't it? The newcomers spoke, and the 3 voices overlapped. The end of the eternal search must have meaning. The King of the White Crown raised his eyebrows, and after a long time, he indifferently retracted his gaze. "Then, what have the guests from the other timeline brought me?" "A possibility," the DM said, "a possibility of saving. What are we taking away?" St said, "A hope to avoid repeating the same mistakes." After a short moment of silence, the King of the White Crown nodded. "A fair trade." He reached out his hand. Thus, the 3 opened their palms, and the 3 broken pages overlapped, turning into an ancient scroll, and fell into the hands of the White Crown King. From the silent surging of the waves, the majestic figure dissipated into the void. No, it should be said that they were sent out of their own domain by the White Crown King. There was also the lifeboat that was slowly approaching the shore. On the boat, the girl who was soaked in the waves woke up from her drowsiness, opened her sleepy eyes, and stared at this strange world. It was cold and dark, cruel as if there was no warmth. "She's cold," St said with pity. He took off a pitch-black robe from his body and gently wrapped it around the girl's shoulders. "Yes, thirsty and hungry." The DM sighed and lit a bonfire. The soup on the fire boiled, and the fish was already crispy. "And lonely and painful." KP waved his hand, and the dark clouds dispersed. The turbid waves were clear, and the bright sun shone between the sea and the sky. Clusters of green plants and flowers grew out of the sharp crevices, and the world was beautiful. The girl looked at them blankly, and shrank back in fear, holding the broken axe blade in her arms. "Who are you?" "The people who came to greet you." St stared at her gently. "Like you, guests who don't belong here." The DM nodded. "Like you, they belong to the fantasy that doesn't exist in reality." KP shrugged. "They are essentially the same, phantoms that don't live in the world. The spirits that only existed in records and rumors," said so, staring at the girl in front of them, their eyes warm and gentle. "But you are different from us." "Yes, not bound by the mission." With freedom and a future, with possibilities. St reached out and gently pulled her up, leading her to the bonfire to feel the warmth. You are here for me? Lily couldn't believe it. To be exact, I took credit for accurately intercepting your records and creating the path to this fictitious branch, KP said proudly. Noticing the fierce glances of his two companions, he suddenly smiled awkwardly. Well, there were some accidents in the middle, but in short, the result is perfect. Yes, perfect. In the end, he shut up in embarrassment. St said, I brought you the frankincense. She opened her 5 fingers, revealing the pure white and crystal clear cream, carrying a pure prayer. I brought gold, the DM said. Since he took out a box from his arms, in the open box, the gorgeous metal shone like the brilliance of the philosopher's stone, showing the inextinguishable faith. Cough, cough, powder. KP took out a string of amber in a hurry. The amber reflected the light of the fire, like a mind that bloomed after being tempered. Here, he gave her a prayer that brought miracles, so that she could return to reality from nothingness. Then, he gave her an inextinguishable faith, so that she would not be lost in the countless complicated things. Finally, he gave her a firm mind, so that she could walk to the end of this dreamlike mortal world. So, illusion and reality were reversed here, and the boundary between fantasy and reality was overturned. With a record of nothingness, an unknown branch and hypothesis was derived from the history of 400 years ago. The past gradually changed in many legends and anecdotes, forming a completely different story. A story that was passed down 400 years later. In a trance, the girl seemed to understand something and looked at them in a daze. Am I fictitious? She asked softly. Fake. You will exist. The sage who came in the opposite direction said, the child who denied the miracle and the saintess who denied the abyss, the soul that originated from nothingness, the pure person. Hela, your existence is the proof of this miracle. They stared at the girl and brought a new fate. In the distant future, there will be another story about hell and heaven to be told again. And you will become a human. Become a legend, a spirit of things. Become the creator and far surpass us. Go and witness all of this, they said, from this moment onwards. This was the beginning of this story in the distant past. The beginning. Chapter 160. Name: Huaisher. Age: 17. Occupation: cowherd. No, it just slipped out of my mouth. Huaisher coughed twice. Occupation is student, also the secretary of the Astronomy Society in Xian High and an action member. I say, can we turn off the light? Under the glaring light, he tried his best to raise his hands that were handcuffed to the table. He wanted to block his eyes, but he was still a little short. The length was not enough. No. The interrogator on the other side of the table slammed the teacup on the table and asked coldly, Tell me, where were you at 7:30 last night, who were you with, and what were you planning to do? Huaisher pursed his lips. Garden restaurant, with your daughter. We were going to have dinner. Bang! Division Chief Fu slammed his hand on the table and widened his eyes. You still dare to King say that? Is it because I can't hold the gun anymore, or have you lost your mind? I've told you time and time again, and you still dare to seduce my daughter. Cough, cough. Huaisher covered his mouth and coughed a few times. He explained with a straight face, It's like this is a philosophical question. Humans are all born and raised by their parents, right? As long as it's a human, then it must be someone's son or daughter, right? In other words, as long as I go out for dinner, then I will definitely have dinner with someone's son or daughter, but this person's father just happens to be you. Look at this, isn't this a coincidence? FNMDP. Division Chief Fu glared at him hatefully. He gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. Look at what you've done. It's one thing to break the law. Our father-daughter relationship has just improved a little, and now it's F***king happening again. You can't blame me for forgetting to go to the school's anniversary celebration, right? You don't want to see your wife, right? Huai Shi sighed. What a coincidence, your wife also thinks the same. Against the light, Huai Shi studied Elder Fu's gloomy face. He shook his head and sighed. Then both of you stood her up. What a sin. What does that have to do with you eating with her? Huai Shi rolled his eyes. He really couldn't stand him. Please, she's not young anymore. She's eating with her friends, not going to a hotel. Why do you care? Bang. You still want to F***king go to a hotel? Just as he finished speaking, a black shadow pounced on him and pulled him up from the chair. His face was ferocious. I knew you were up to no good, you little bastard. For example, let me give you an example. Huai Shi was almost out of breath. Let go of me. I'm calling for help. Save me. The Special Affairs Division is beating people up. Help? Director Fu, forget it. The people next to him were also stunned and quickly rushed forward. Some of them tried to break his hand, some tried to calm him down, and some tried to say something nice. After a long time, they finally managed to stuff Director Fu back into his chair. What a pity for all parents. Huai Shi sighed and shook his head helplessly. He flicked a piece of iron wire from between his fingers and twisted it a few times inside the handcuffs before unlocking them. After moving his wrists a little, he straightened his collar and sat up straight. He said earnestly, Hey, old Fu, you know my character. Who are you calling old Fu? Director Fu's eyes widened. Your character? Don't you know how despicable you are? That's F***king enough. Huai Shi was so angry that he wanted to flip the table. Then, he said helplessly, Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. I swear to God, I don't have any bad intentions towards your daughter, huh? Old Fu's expression darkened. You mean you're not interested in her now that you're noble? Huai Shi felt like he was going to explode. His head hurt. Big brother, you're really my big brother. It's wrong to like her, and it's also wrong to not like her. What the F***ck do you want? Old Fu's face turned green. If you take advantage of me again, I'll throw you out of here. Do you believe me? Okay. Huai Shi lowered his head helplessly and begged for mercy. Fu Yi is my good brother. Even if I die today, even if I jump down from this building, I won't think about dating her. What era are we in now? Please put away all your dirty thoughts. She's a good student, but you're not. Director Fu stared at the little bastard in front of him vigilantly. It was as if he was looking at a thief who sneaked into his backyard with a hoe when he wasn't at home. Don't you know what kind of person Fu Yi is? Okay, you don't know her very well, but you should at least have some confidence in her, okay? Huai Shi scratched his head and sighed. To be honest, I'm not interested in your family's relationship, and I don't intend to interfere in her personal affairs. But at the very least, you have to understand that not everyone's head is filled with adolescent hormones and blindly fall in love. Not everyone needs their father to send a sniper to target their classmates with infrared cameras 24/7. Not everyone needs their mother to send a detective to investigate the background of every classmate. Besides, even if you do this, is it really useful? Can you change her mind? Director Fu was speechless. After a long time, he sighed irritably. She's in her rebellious phase. I have to say, if she's in her rebellious phase, you're really saving yourself a lot of trouble. Huai Shi shook his head. He didn't want to argue with the biological father of his classmate about teaching his daughter anymore. He was thinking about getting the business done as soon as possible. But he suddenly forgot what the business was. By the way, what am I doing here? How would I know? Director Fu was furious. Do you think the Special Affairs Division is your home? Do you have nothing better to do? I just came in and was handcuffed here without saying anything. I'm also very desperate. Huaisher suddenly became more and more angry. After thinking for a long time, he finally remembered and slapped his forehead. "Oh right, my border hunter license and excursion permit." Thus, old Fu's expression became very reluctant. 10 minutes later, the clerk handed a whole folder to Huaisher. "TSK." Director Fu sent him out and reminded him in the end. "Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have a license and permit. You have to abide by the law, understand? You're the one who took the lead in breaking the law. What right do you have to say that to me?" Huaisher carried his backpack and walked away. "I'm running away. I won't come again next time." Who could stand being locked up every time they came to this stupid place? Not long after he left, he received a call from Fu Yi. The voice on the other end of the phone was quite noisy. He could hear people coming and going. "Are you free?" She vaguely heard the sound of typing on the keyboard. She said, "I'm in an internet cafe with Lu Rong and Liao Jun. Come on, I'll take you up." "Forget it. The last person who wanted to play with me has been dead for 400 years. Huaisher shook his head and thought for a while before explaining, "Don't worry, I'm fine. We're just sharing our experiences. It's just a meal. Do you think he'll send me to the border?" "Yes, we'll eat again next time." Fu Yi's tone seemed to be a little more relaxed. "What do you want to eat?" Liao Jun's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. "Bring me along. It's my treat. There's a barbecue place nearby. Go away, go away. You've lost all your points. You only know how to eat. I'm stuck. Zoom in, zoom in. Rong Rong, let's go. Hey, mine. Liao Jun was a member of the organization department of the student union. He seemed to have some thoughts about Fu Yi. Although his family background was quite good, he was not a bully. Instead, he was more like a big brother. His grades were good, his personality was good, and he could be said to be sunny and handsome. After being rejected by Fu Yi several times, he didn't seem to have given up. He had secretly inquired about her university direction. It seemed like he was planning to run a long distance. However, Miss Rong's heart was like iron. She had already seen through the world of mortals from her parent. Although she didn't deliberately ignore him, she had always tactfully limited the distance between her friends. He was afraid that she couldn't escape the good friend card. After reading her long list of life plans, Huaisher doubted whether this person had any plans to get married. But this had nothing to do with him. After all, life wasn't a novel. There was more than just love. Even if they didn't get married, Huaisher believed that Fu Yi would be able to rely on herself in the future. Hearing their noises, Huaisher could only sigh. It's good to be young. He didn't know why, but a sense of vicissitudes of life rose in his heart. He suddenly became artistic. After a wave of team battles, Fu Yi still seemed a little worried. "You're really not eating?" "Really, I'm going home to study," Huaisher said. "I'm going to Jinling for the exam next week." Okay, Fu Yi didn't say anything else. She calmly said, "Then we'll meet in Jinling." "What did you say?" Huaisher was stunned. Before he could ask, the phone hung up. Huaisher was left standing alone in the middle of the road. He looked at the heavy traffic in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. He suddenly felt a little scared that Director Fu would bring people to Jinling. When he got home, he saw that the flowers that Fang Shu watered for the past 2 days had already bloomed. The originally bleak front yard had returned to its usual gentle appearance. Fang Shu was standing at the door. After checking the package, he signed it for the delivery man. After the delivery man left, Huaisher threw down his bag and saw a huge box in the living room. "What the hell? Where did you buy it? How much is it?" Huaisher stared at Crow and struck him 3 times. "Your teaching materials. I bought them from the official Giant Swan Tengu store of the Stoneware Society. Each set includes free shipping. They include 8 DVDs of master lectures. It's not expensive. Each set is only 4 million yuan. How much?" Sure was so shocked that he almost jumped up and poked a hole in the ceiling. 4 million? 4 million yuan for a bunch of crap? Knowledge is priceless, kid. Crow looked at him with disappointment. In this kind of monopolized industry, they can make as much money as they want. If you really learn it, you'll earn it back in a few years. Earn my ass. It's all for you. Sure rolled his eyes and opened the box. He found that the Stoneware Society was shockingly stingy. The big iron box was wrapped in layers of bubble wrap. In the end, there were only 10 books. One was an introduction to alchemy that didn't have any nutritional value. There were also 2 mineral illustrated handbooks and 8 books on metals. They were all things that he already knew. Sure was furious. You want me to pay 4 million for these crap? Did you know? Once upon a time, there was an unlucky kid like you. His family was poor, but he was gifted. Crow said seriously. He didn't buy expensive teaching materials. He self-taught and passed the Stoneware Society's alchemy exam. Guess what happened next? He became a master? Sure asked tentatively. Later, when the results came out, the Stoneware Society found that they couldn't find the serial number and record of the teaching materials he bought in their database. They thought that he had stolen knowledge that didn't belong to them. They reported him to the Astronomy Society and arrested him. Crow said coldly. He was sentenced to 92 years in prison and hard labor for infringing the Stoneware Society's copyright. He's still in prison planting chrysanthemums. Chapter 161. Crow's poisonous chicken soup story was also very effective today. Sure shuddered after hearing it, and immediately scolded the shameless bastards of the Stoneforge Society. Do you think the society is used to invite people to dinner, embroider, and write calligraphy? Crow sneered. Protecting the interests of the group to the greatest extent is the foundation of an organization. With such a huge profit in front of them, the Stoneforge Society even dared to split from the Pioneer Society. Moreover, miracles are originally luxuries. If you don't pay the price for it, it will only lead to disaster. With the tragic consequences of the abuse of alchemy and the huge monopoly profits behind, anyone would choose the conservative option. Then what's this other piece of paper? Sure took out a document from the bottom of the box. It looked like a patent? A patent certificate in your name. Crow said. Haven't you been tinkering with that a few days ago? Metal explosives. I looked it up, but there was no relevant formula. After I bought this set of materials, I immediately registered one in your name. After the cheat, if an alchemy workshop buys your patent, they can use it to produce products. It's a buyout system. It's about 400,000 at a time, and the society takes a quarter. Although it's not much, no matter how small a mosquito's leg is, it's still meat. You can more or less earn some pocket money. This was a byproduct of Sure's improved knowledge of metals after he came back. The main body was made of unstable alloys such as magnesium, tin, and cesium. It was smelted into shape in one go, and then ignited with alchemy fire to create an explosive effect. Although the effect was not very good, and it could only be used as a non-lethal weapon like a smoke bomb or a flash bomb, it could reach the power of a small fragmentation grenade if it was carefully made. It could also make up for his lack of damage output. Hearing that this thing could be sold for money, he was overjoyed. Then I'm going to be rich? What are you dreaming about? Crow looked at him as if he was an idiot. How many formulas do you think there are? No less than a few 100,000. There are more than 4,000 alchemy explosives that involve metal materials. It's more cost-effective than your formula. Your advantage lies in the fact that it's entirely made of metal. It can be used to great effect in certain situations, and you can rub it with your hands at any time. But do you think everyone has the alchemy fire? Without the alchemy fire to ignite it on the spot, it would have to be made in advance, which would reduce its popularity. Moreover, there are countless mature products on the market. How can there be room for a small workshop like ours to stir up trouble? Huaisher felt a chill in his heart when he heard this. He immediately comforted himself. After investing so much, there's finally hope of recovering the cost. It's fine as long as I can sell it and make a little profit. After discarding his dream of getting rich overnight, Crow inquired about Huaisher's progress. How far have you progressed with the silver blood potion? Huaisher scratched his head. According to your suggestion, we'll work on both ends. One will take 5 minutes and can be used as a small health potion. The other will only take about 4 seconds and can be used as an enhanced band-aid. Alright, this way you'll have a healing skill. Crow didn't ask for more. Something like the silver blood potion was enough. There was no need to invest more effort to specialize in it. If his alchemy level could be raised, then the effect would naturally rise. Moreover, the most technical part of this thing wasn't the potion itself, but the patented solvent that prevented the silver blood potion from solidifying after cooling. Otherwise, the silver blood potion would turn from liquid to solid after an hour of production. At that time, its original effect would be removed and it would even become a poison. After all, not many people's stomachs were strong enough to digest metal. As for the solvent that prevented solidification, each workshop had their own techniques and methods, and the price was higher than the other. If it was for personal use, there was no need to buy it at all. In short, it's fine. Many big bosses can't reach your level. For the time being, there's no need to invest any more time. Crow spread his wings and motioned for him to follow him to the basement. In the darkness, when he passed through the basement's corridor, he heard the faint sound of electric current. The old light bulb hanging above his head flickered. But in the flickering of the light, Huaisher found that his body began to fade. When he deliberately entered the state of a ghost, he found that his body flashed and disappeared with the flickering of the light. In a dark place, his silhouette would melt into a dim gray fog, and under the dim light, it was difficult to feel his existence. It was like an illusion reflected by a projector in the dust. Crow noticed the abnormality in his body and looked back. His eyes were slightly satisfied. Very good, it seems that you've almost mastered the ghost. Should I prepare to advance? Huaisher asked. No rush. Crow shook his head. There are many ways to advance, but before that, I still need to make a choice. To be honest, I'm still hesitating. What are you hesitating about? A lot of hesitation. For example, the future, your life, and other trivial things. Crow landed on the table, so I decided to wait and see. At least choose the most suitable one, right? Just choose one that's not a trap. Huaisher waved his hand. He wanted to cry for the cat. He was really scared of being tricked by Crow. Don't worry, if the plan doesn't go wrong, you won't have to drive illegal cars in the future. Crow waved his wings and pointed at the silver cross spear on the table. You can take that away. Cross spear, compassion. Huaisher had awakened another type of origin substance weapon. It was a rare long weapon. Even though he didn't know how to use it, it could still be used to stab people. And its effect was to let the person who was stabbed by Huaisher feel the sorrow and pity in Huaisher's heart. It was as if he was saying, I didn't have any other choice. I didn't stab you on purpose. Who told you to be so disobedient? Even though it sounded quite strange, it was only when one was actually stabbed by it that they realized how vicious its effects were. Just like how the axe of wrath could cause a person's mind to be shaken, or how the rope of sorrow could cause a person to feel discouraged, the spear of compassion could cause an enemy's fighting spirit to crumble, causing them to think about what they were doing, whether or not everything they were doing had any meaning, and why they were doing it. Even if they were stabbed to death, they wouldn't feel any hatred or unwillingness in their hearts. Instead, they would feel calm and peaceful. It was basically the spear of salvation. After Huaisher had been stabbed, he had been in the state of a sage for a full hour. From then on, he no longer wanted to be Crow's test subject. Of course, the most important thing was the azure crown dragon's blood. It was as if there was an endless flow of dragon blood. The faint trace of blood constantly dripped with sticky, poisonous blood. The Philosopher's Stone's unique properties gave it inconceivable miracles. Wherever the blood dripped, a pure white iris flower would grow. After 10 minutes, it would wither along with the dissipating blood. If it danced, the whole practice field would become beautiful. Fragrant and pure petals would bloom in every corner, interweaving into a dazzling garden. Just this sound and visual effect alone made Huai Shi want to give KP 100,000 likes. But what made him even more satisfied was the effect of the dragon blood. Decay. The most terrifying thing about the azure crown dragon was its breath of decay that could compare to time. Wherever the breath passed, all things would decay. This characteristic seemed to have been inherited by the dragon blood, and now it was attached to Huai Shi's spear. This led to the fact that when stabbed, once the dragon blood on the spear entered the victim's body, the victim's energy would begin to decline rapidly. If the dosage was high enough, it would even cause a temporary aging effect. Even if it wasn't tainted by the dragon blood, just being in this field of flowers and smelling its fragrance would cause one's energy to rapidly decline, causing dizziness and depression. Simply put, Huai Shi would be able to enjoy beating up old people even more in the future. But the most troublesome thing was that this poison was also effective on Huai Shi. He had no way of avoiding it. Thus, he could only ask Crow to study its properties and temporarily create an antidote. The result was the syringes on the table. Use one of the previous ones. It should last for about half an hour. Just use it carefully, Crow said casually. Now, we need to start a physical examination. It was still the same old routine. There were all sorts of common and uncommon methods, as well as blood tests and CT scans. Yes, CT scans. Crow had even bought a CT machine and placed it in the corner of the room. Every few days, she would call Huai Shi over to take a picture. In any case, an ascendant's physique was very long, so this level of radiation was nothing. Actually, the main thing this time was to check if there were any side effects. When they were on the ship, Huai Shi's origin substance and Van Helsing's origin substance had coexisted for too long. Generally speaking, this situation would cause Huai Shi's consciousness to be completely covered by Van Helsing, turning him into a walking corpse. However, there was the artifact Book of Destiny, which carried all the memories of the first half of his life, ensuring his personality and soul's independence. Therefore, the only thing to worry about was that the contamination of the origin substance would cause slight changes to the body. Fortunately, everything was under control. It was just that Huai Shi wasn't used to it. After being a level 3 ascendant for so long, and even acting as a fake holy light fighter, returning to his own body made him especially uncomfortable. Especially since Van Helsing was one of the best among level 3 ascendants. Now, Huai Shi even had to use all his strength to barely catch up to the foundation he had when he was Van Helsing, and sometimes he was far from it. The lag in his nerve reflexes allowed him to get used to it, but it was still uncomfortable. It's done. Crow raised his eyes from the results and pointed to the end of the basement, at the iron pile 20 meters away. Let me see your current limit of speed and strength. I'll try. Huai Shi moved his body slightly, and darkness covered his body. His whole body was shrouded in darkness, and the crack in his chest surged with spiraling light. Feeling the majestic dark origin substance in his body, he closed his eyes and exhaled the breath in his lungs. In the next moment, a sinister bloody light burst out from his eyes. A roar sounded. Chapter 162. In the blink of an eye, a gust of wind blew in the room. Amidst the deafening sound, the cross spear appeared in Huai Shi's hand. As he stepped forward, it tore through the air again, bursting forth with a shrill whistle. A blazing light, like melting steel, flashed and disappeared. Then, there was the sound of something shattering. At the end of the basement, an iron stake covered with a special alloy had been penetrated by the spear blade, drilling a deep crack, and the two branches of the spear wedged into the steel. Amidst the crisp sound of the crack spreading, there was the sound of the alloy surface peeling off. On the wall behind the iron stake, a crack silently appeared. Where the spear tip pointed, dust flowed down from the crack and piled up on the ground, forming a pile of white dust. At that moment, Huai Shi, who had used all his strength, regained the speed and strength of a vampire, although the price was that he was almost exhausted and his arms were numb. But if he used the dust of the dispelled, he could even use this kind of attack a few more times. Even if he used the alchemy fire to control the explosion, he could divide the dust of the dispelled from the inside out into 16 layers and explode like a fuse, creating an even more exaggerated lethality in an instant. Very good. Crow seemed to have finally gained confidence. With your level, I can rest assured that you can participate in the demon-slaying competition. What competition? Huai Shi was stunned. The demon-slaying competition, Crow said calmly. You should know what it is just from the literal meaning, right? There's such a competition? Huai Shi only felt that it was amazing. Sure enough, there were all kinds of strange things in this world. It was founded by a group of troublesome group leaders, and the location is in a small mobile border. It can be said that it's one of the most famous competitions in the border. This time, it's only a selection in the southern part of the Dongsha region. If you participate, the chances of winning are not small. The most important thing is that among the prizes there are many products from Hell, and there's a high probability that there will be materials related to your next advancement. Hearing about his advancement, Huai Shi immediately became extremely cautious. But soon, he noticed the vocabulary in her words. Group leader? He was stunned. Which group's administrator? If you understand it that way, it's not too much of a problem. Crow looked at him speechlessly. The so-called leader of a large group is used by the people of the present realm to refer to the rulers of a part of the depths of Hell. They are usually strong people who have lived in Hell for hundreds of years. They are monsters among monsters. They themselves are the leaders and rulers of a certain race. Almost every one of them can represent the existence of a force in Hell. Do you understand now? It sounds so strong. There are strong ones and weak ones. The strong ones can fight their natural enemies head-on, while the weak ones can be beaten up by you. Crow cautiously said, this competition can be tacitly approved by the Astronomical Society, and even be able to send out invitations in the present realm. This proves that their power is definitely not low. You have to be careful, don't offend the organizers. Being blacklisted is a small matter, but if they do something to you, then you'll be in trouble. Although they won't go as far as to kill their own contestants, they can still leave some kind of curse that will make you unlucky for decades. Moreover, their curses are especially torturous. The last person who messed around in the competition was cursed. Until now, everything he drank tasted like cold water. He hasn't drunk a mouthful of hot water for decades. Even his feces is not warm. Huai Shi suddenly shivered after hearing this. He immediately reacted. No, these guys should generally be demons, right? Is there something wrong with spending money to have a demon-slaying competition? You'll know when you go. Crow looked at him with a complicated expression. This competition is very important to you. Although it's a bit beyond your limits, I hope you can win. Don't worry, as long as there's no fourth step, I can still fight. Huai Shi thought for a long time and encouraged himself. If you can solve it just by fighting, then it'll be easy. Crow sighed worriedly. It's rare for you to be so confident, so I won't discourage you. I'll be prepared later. I hope you can also use these tools flexibly. When does this competition start? Huai Shi asked. What a coincidence, it's tonight. Crow revealed a smile that made Huai Shi uneasy. Isn't this a coincidence? As she said this, she picked up the black invitation letter with some kind of hell's language written in gold and placed it in front of Huai Shi. I wish you a safe journey. Midnight. 12 o'clock. On the lawn behind the Chalcedony Hall, Huai Shi carried a huge iron box, as if he was delivering takeout. He also wore a cheap plastic Pepsi mask on his face. He looked down at the invitation letter in his hand, puzzled. He felt that there was something wrong with this Demon Slayer competition, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Carrying the box of secret weapons Crow prepared for him, he didn't even have time to open it before he was urged to go by Crow. But before he left, he was stopped by Fang Shu. Young master, that. He looked at the plastic mask on Huai Shi's face that cost $2 and hesitated for a long time. Then he took out a cloth bag from his arms. It's a bit inappropriate to wear that kind of thing. If you don't mind, I have. Huai Shi took it in puzzlement. When he opened the cloth bag, his face twitched behind the mask. Okay. He picked up the mask in the cloth bag. It was made of iron, and when he knocked on it, it made a clanging sound. If he guessed correctly, Uncle Fong must have used the hairdryer in the storage room in the backyard to cut it in half and welded it himself. In order to cater to his young master's strange aesthetic, he even found a can of spray paint from who knows where. After spraying it pink, he welded 2 screws on it to act as eyeballs. Still Pepsi. Isn't this still Pepsi? Huai Shi wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Seeing Fang Shu's expectant eyes, he could only squeeze out a smile and keep it on his face. Fang Shu looked at it attentively, picked up the paint brush in his hand, and painted 2 red circles on it. After that, he took a step back and smiled with relief. It was as if he was looking at the most handsome boy within a few hundred miles. Then I'll prepare breakfast and wait for you to come back. He nodded and saluted, then turned and left. Look, even Fang Shu is cheering for you. On Huai Shi's shoulder, Crow sighed. You have to do your best. I feel even more powerless. What should I do? Then think of something better. For example, how about your savings? Crow said, I've spent more than 10 million and only have 800 left. You have to work harder to support your family. Please don't say any more, okay? Huai Shi became more and more powerless. His whole body seemed to have turned pale. He didn't want to pay attention to this stupid thing. He picked up the invitation and walked onto the lawn. According to Crow's translation on the invitation, it was very simple to participate in the competition. All he had to do was hold the invitation and walk around the 3-way intersection a few times at a predetermined time. The organizer would receive his signal and pull him into the border. It sounded unbelievably convenient. But the problem was, where was he supposed to find the 3-way intersection? The intersection was easy to find, but suddenly asking Huai Shi to find a 3-way intersection was a bit of a pain in the ass. In desperation, he could only follow Crow's instructions. Anyway, it was a road. His own road was also a road. During the day, Fang Shu used a lawn mower to push out a small path on the lawn. Why does it seem so unreliable? Under the quiet moonlight, Huai Shi stared at the simple 3-way intersection on the lawn in front of him. With the invitation in hand, he took a step forward and then froze in place. It was foggy. The more he walked forward, the thicker the fog became. Until he followed the ritual on the invitation and stood still at the 3-way intersection. After taking 10 steps in 3 different directions, the fog was so thick that he couldn't even see his own fingers. In a brief moment of absent-mindedness, Huai Shi seemed to hear the faint sound of a bell. The fog suddenly dissipated. He was back at the 3-way intersection. But this time, he was no longer on the lawn of his house, but on a busy intersection that was wide enough for several carriages to come and go. In fact, there were really all kinds of old-fashioned carriages coming and going at the 3-way intersection. With the light hanging on the carriages, Huai Shi could see that there were human-like existences in the carriages. Even the coachman's face had scales or cheek. In addition to horses, there were all kinds of messy things that were pulling the carriages. There was even an early simple car that drove past him, leaving a choking smoke behind. And in the car, the arrogant green-skinned goblin was still shouting angrily, go away, don't block the road." Huai Shi was obedient and obediently moved to the side of the road. When he looked at the road sign, he found that the words on it were completely unrecognizable. Following his gaze, the words on the road sign twisted like a living creature and then turned into the Eastern Xia language. Left, White Town. Right, Green Island Food Fair. Back, Gray Coast. "Go to Green Island, remember not to go in the wrong direction," Crow reminded him. "This is an intermediate border, it will be troublesome if you get lost." "Food fair?" Huai Shi was stunned. "Are you sure? Just go. Why are you asking so many questions?" Okay. As they walked forward, Huai Shi felt that there were more and more people on the side of the road, as if they had suddenly walked out of a fork in the fog. Most of them looked like humans, and quite a few of them were ascendants. Their bodies glowed faintly, and they carried all kinds of weapons with them. They seemed to be very skilled, and a few of them gave Huai Shi a sense of threat. When those guys lowered their heads to look at people, their eyes were like looking at food. At some point, the ground under his feet had turned into a cement road. In the distance, lights that looked like a playground lit up, and there was a hubbub of voices. But when Huai Shi raised his head, he felt a chill and froze on the spot. Crow looked at his stunned expression and could not help but sigh. "What's wrong? Why are you so surprised? Don't make people think that you're from the countryside, okay?" But, the sky. Huai Shi looked up at the sky, or rather, the thing that was supposed to be the sky above the sky. As far as the eye could see, the bright starry sky had disappeared, and in its place was a turbulent ocean. Countless undercurrents surged, setting off layers of waves. The waves splashed, but they did not fall to the ground. The vast and boundless dark ocean enveloped everything. White sails could be vaguely seen jumping and sailing at the tip of the wind and waves. Separated by tens of thousands of meters, Huai Shi could even hear the faint roar of countless currents colliding. The ocean was surging, constantly turbulent, as if it would pour down from the sky at any time, drowning everything. Chapter 163. Just thinking about this, Huai Shi couldn't help but shiver. Isn't it the same in the realm of discovery? You can accept the coral clouds, so why can't you accept the sky changing? Crow calmly asked. Don't worry. At worst, you can just treat it as a change of material. But why did it become like this? The entire border area of Doomsday is like this. To be exact, the entire border area of Asia is covered by this endless sea. Every few days, a torrent will sweep across and descend from the sky, drowning everything. Then, they will begin to rebuild and wait for the next torrent to descend. It's even worse in Rome. It's said that the entire city has sunk into the earth's crust. The fire in the Middle East hasn't been extinguished yet. The Steel City is built on fire and lava. Crow sighed. This is the proof of leaving the realm of discovery. Why sure, in a stable place like the border, you don't have to worry about other dangers, but don't think about returning to the cradle. Be tough and show your manly spirit. Isn't it just a sea? Just pretend it doesn't exist. Although he said that, it was impossible to pretend you didn't see such a big thing. Huai Shi almost forced himself to lower his head and forget about this matter. He didn't have to worry about the sea above suddenly crashing down. He braced himself and walked forward. Next to him, a fat man saw his stiff appearance and couldn't help but laugh. He scratched his armpits and chuckled in the body odor. A new face, young man. You look quite capable. Are you also a participant in this year's demon-slaying competition? Ah yes. Huai Shi carefully slowed down a little, wanting to avoid the suffocating body odor. However, he soon found that the smell behind him was even worse. He could only grit his teeth and speed up. "Ha, when the time comes, bring it on." The fat man grinned and looked quite hot-blooded. "I won't lose to you." Unfortunately, his figure did not appear to be one that could slay monsters and devils. Furthermore, he was carrying an iron wok on his back. He appeared to be a chef. Fortunately, the fat man soon slowed down and began to chat and laugh with his greasy companions. Looking at the huge boxes they carried, their heavy footsteps, and their robust bodies, all of them reminded Huai Shi that they were all strong enemies. It didn't take long for Huai Shi to reach the amusement park lights. He saw the crowd surging through the open iron gate. Not only were there people from Dongxia, Yingzhou, Myanmar, and so on, but there were also many white and black people walking among them. Their eyes were fierce, and their expressions were cold as they looked at the contestants next to them. However, their attire was a little strange, which made Huai Shi feel that something was wrong. What was even more shocking was that, just outside the door, the bustling square was actually filled with stalls. All kinds of strange people were loudly hawking all kinds of strange things. Take a look, 30-year-old canned herring. It smells disgusting, it tastes disgusting, and it's limited. If you want to buy it, hurry up. Authentic soy milk, premium Scottish fold. Everyone, come and take a look. We have everything. Don't miss it. Fresh rotten durian, authentic green hair poisonous wine, brewed with selected goblin leg hair. It has been selected as a non-cultural heritage of hell. If I drink it today, you will have an inheritance tomorrow. Freshly cooked abyss snail noodles with curry. Oh my God! Huai Shi was hit by the stench. He staggered back and almost vomited. His face was pale. Crow looked at him in confusion. "What are you waiting for? Go and buy it." Huai Shi was dumbfounded. "Buy what?" "Your materials," Crow asked. "If you don't buy fresh materials, how can you participate in the demon-slaying competition? Are you going to rely on these broken things to slay demons?" Huai Shi felt that he was going crazy. "Do you have to chant scriptures?" Crow froze in place and looked at him blankly. After a long time, he said hesitantly, "I know what's wrong." Huai Shi was puzzled. "Have you misunderstood from the beginning?" Crow sighed. "The demon-slaying competition I'm talking about is not the demon-slaying competition, Huai Shi was alert. "It's the chef's chef." "What's that?" Huai Shi turned around and looked in the direction of the gate. There was a signboard. On the signboard, a line of strange words kept changing. In the end, it was fixed in the Dongxia language. "The 107th Demon Slaying Competition, East Asia Audition, Dongxia Arena, contestants, please get ready." A low voice sounded from the loudspeaker, with a trembling voice like two tongues. "In 10 minutes, you will officially enter the arena to prepare for the competition. Please maintain an orderly line. Do not violate the safety regulations in the arena. Violators will be cursed by the group leaders." In a daze, Huai Shi turned his head stiffly and looked at Crow's innocent face. He swallowed his saliva and asked, "Is it too late for me to leave now?" Also, because too many contestants have left this year, the organizing committee has decided that contestants who have an invitation but do not participate in the competition will be punished. The strange voice from the loudspeaker shouted loudly, "These cowards will be cursed by the judges. They will only be able to eat sh*t flavored curry and curry sh*t for the rest of their lives." In the awkward silence, Crow looked at Huai Shi with pity. "I don't think so. F*ck. Huai Shi was in complete despair. Should he say that this competition was too F*king crazy, or that it was indeed a competition held by the group leaders? It was full of hellish craziness as always. Even the result of their pursuit was so different. If the demon-slaying competition was to see who could cook better, then the demon-slaying competition was— that's right, it was to see who could cook worse food. According to the group of people in the organizing committee who had nothing better to do every day, there was a limit to the so-called delicious food, no matter how hard one tried. But there was no limit to how bad it tasted. There was no limit to how bad it tasted. There would be no worst food, only worse food. And the so-called demon-slaying competition was a competition to see who could cook worse food. Since its birth 100 years ago, it had attracted many strong contestants from all over the world, the border, and even hell. It had created many miracles and nightmares. Until now, the standard way to watch the competition was to wear a gas mask, and it was the kind that covered the head as well. Originally, there wasn't any. All they needed was a mask. However, ever since the champion of the previous 9 tournaments brought out a pot of demon jumps over the wall in the finals, 1/3 of the audience fell into severe depression and despair after smelling the horrible smell. They lost the hope of living and committed suicide in the following month. The aftermath had spread and still hadn't been extinguished. Later, in order to cherish their lives, everyone had to spend a little more money. Even if it was just the East Asian region of Dongxia, there were many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. No one knew how many monsters were lurking among them. As for Huai Shi, she could only tremble in fear. He felt like he was going to die. How the hell was he going to fight? He couldn't win. He was going to lose. Don't be discouraged, believe in yourself, you will definitely create a miracle. Crow had put on a crow's mouth gas mask and patted him on the shoulder with a deep voice. I will cheer for you in the audience. What the hell? Huai Shi was stunned. You're not going with me? Why should I go with you? That stinks. It's not that. The crow coughed dryly. The rules of the competition are quite strict, and they don't allow pets. Furthermore, I'm just a pitiful and helpless little crow, I can't help you. Anyway, I've given you the tools and you've bought the materials. After that, you can use your own creativity. After saying that, the crow left Huai Shi alone and flew away. Huai Shi was left standing alone in the same place. Under the fierce glare of the security guard, he walked into the contestant lounge with tears in his eyes. Then, he stiffened in place. At this moment, in the contestant lounge, Huai Shi felt the breath of strong people coming from all directions, as well as body odor. Amidst the dozens of white arms, Huai Shi recalled that everyone here used to be a powerhouse who was sweating in the kitchen with their upper bodies bare. The elites of the dark cuisine world. They were either aunties who had been cooking in the school cafeteria for more than 10 years, chefs who had worked on the green train for more than 5 years, or magicians who mixed gutter oil and artificial essence to create nightmarish flavors. Noticing that Huai Shi had walked in, there were a few fierce gazes that looked over. When they saw that the person who had walked in was a weak chicken with a pale face, they snorted and looked away in disdain. A few solid gazes collided in the air. Bursts of electricity. Humph, old Wang, give up. The orthodox dark cuisine is in the higher education world. In the middle of the room, a middle-aged woman stood with her hands behind her back and coldly said, "In order to refine the secret recipe, I worked in the University of Science and Technology for 14 years. Now, your insignificant skills can't win against this rotten tomato stir-fried mooncake in my hands. Persecuting innocent university students all day long, what the F*** are you proud of? Chi." Old Wang crossed his arms and sneered. How can this kind of thing used to fool children compare to the hellish cuisine of our dining car? That feeling of being sealed with nowhere to run and the feeling of joy in your heart when you swallow the food into your stomach with fear. Junior sister, you will never understand it. It's obviously a disgusting dish, why are you so proud of it? Moreover, junior sister, what are you doing? What kind of internal strife is this? I beg you, don't persecute an innocent youth like me. Why don't you go back and find a kitchen to compare? Before Huai Shi could spit out a mouthful of blood, he heard a scalp-numbing sharp laughter coming from a dark corner of the room where the light couldn't reach. Kakik, What are you two youngsters in such a hurry for? That gloomy and stooped old man raised his turbid eyes, emitting a cold light. Our Amay Mountain's Golden Peak sect will definitely win this competition. Today, we'll let you experience the power of our famous cuisine. Every bite will make you feel heartache. What the hell is the Golden Peak sect? Is it very proud to rip off customers at famous attractions? Are you guys holding a martial arts convention? I'll have to trouble you to retract your magical powers. Huai Shi's origin substance was already unstable from the pressure of the expert's aura. He was about to go crazy. Just as the other two siblings were about to retort, they heard the door open with a loud rumble. Amidst the heavy footsteps, a deep voice announced loudly from outside the door, Dijin Authentic Cat ignores steamed bun restaurant head chef Lu has arrived. In the blink of an eye, the room suddenly froze. Huai Shi saw countless waves of origin substance filled with fighting spirits soar into the sky. Countless broken pots and spatulas clanged together, and even the smelly fish in the basket jumped up with all their might. It was as if 10,000 swords were clanging together. Paying respects to the great master. Chapter 164. At that moment, everyone present raised their heads in unison. A majestic pressure swept towards the door like a tidal wave. However, it immediately dissipated under a disdainful gaze. A figure walked into the lounge and sat down on the main seat. His aura was so majestic that it seemed to suppress the heavens. But right after that, another aura came from outside the door, tit for tat. Xia Shi Road Food Street Dumpling Contestant Master Zhao has arrived. He, Master Lu, it's time to compete this year. An old, deep laugh came from outside the door. Be careful. This old man has prepared a trump card this year. He, strange skills, Master Lu sneered. No matter how many tricks you have, can you beat our 100-year-old dark stew? Before the newcomer could stand still, several powerful auras appeared outside the door. Chong, an overnight lamb soup chef Li has arrived. Master Chen from Cheongzhou's rotten shrimp stall. For a moment, all the heroes gathered in the lounge. Even the air seemed to have solidified under the terrifying collision of auras. The Grandmasters sat in their chairs and stared at each other. Their auras fell down, crushing everything in their path. Huai Shi's face was ashen when he heard half of the announcement. He had lost all will to fight. How could he fight? No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't beat someone else's cooking. This wasn't a gap that could be made up for by skill. It was a nightmare created by the pain and anguish of countless innocent travelers. Just by looking at them, Huai Shi could see a sea of dark origin substance behind them. It was the pain and resentment of countless people who had eaten shit, as well as the sadness of self-deception that had already come. Next to him, someone handed him a tissue and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid. Just perform as usual." The person who spoke was a kind-looking older sister. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail, and she looked very capable. Huai Shi took the tissue and couldn't help but wipe his cold sweat. He shook his head with a bitter smile. How can I perform as usual? I don't even have a regular routine. All I know is how to cook noodles. Humph, it's another guy who doesn't know how high the sky is. Beside him, a man exuding a dark aura sneered, "You always think that you can make it taste bad as long as you make it carelessly. You don't know how much hard work and effort it takes to make it taste bad. What's the point of making the food even more disgusting when I have nothing better to do?" Huai Shi didn't want to respond at all. He only hoped that this competition would end quickly so that he could go up and make up the numbers so that he could quickly be eliminated and go home. At this moment, the entire contestant lounge shook. All the contestants fell silent and raised their heads. The ceiling was lifted. It was like opening a box. A huge shadow squatted outside the box and looked down at them. Soon, it nodded slightly. "The honorable judges have entered the arena. Get ready." You will have the chance to go on stage soon. Those who are here to make up the numbers had better quit as soon as possible. The huge shadow opened its blood-red eye and announced coldly, "This time, an honorable lord has come. If he gets angry because of my poor skills, it won't be something that can be appeased by eating shit for the rest of your life." Boom. The lid of the box closed. In the silence, everyone in the lounge looked at each other. Their expressions were no longer frivolous. Instead, they became solemn. Huai Shi swallowed his saliva and looked at the empty exit. He hesitated for a moment and shook his head resolutely. Rather than eat shit-tasting curry for the rest of his life, he might as well die. He could only show his true ability. Huai Shi's fighting spirit was ignited, but it was immediately burned away. True ability, my ass. He didn't know how to do it well at all. The door opened with a bang. A burly man in leather pants glanced around the room and picked up the number plate in his hand. Contestant 109, Contestant 89, Contestant 44, Contestant 88, get ready to go on stage. After the first batch of contestants left, the second batch of contestants was quickly called away, followed by the third batch, the fourth batch. The room became more and more empty. Huai Shi became more and more uneasy. In the end, even the young lady next to him who had been comforting him stopped talking. She closed her eyes and rested, waiting for the competition to begin. He didn't know what the result was, nor did he know if he passed the selection. The only thing he knew was that those who were called away never came back. Huai Shi became more and more nervous. In the end, someone walked in and glanced at the last few people in the room. He nodded and said, "Okay, all of you come together. The judges can't wait any longer." Everyone hurriedly picked up their tools and followed behind him. This time, the judges' taste is very bad. If you are here to make up the numbers, it's best that you admit defeat and withdraw from the competition. Believe me, this is for your own good. The green-skinned orc walked in front with the list in his hand. A tentacle monster with eyes wriggled over, dragging a screaming person in its hand. "Give me another chance. Give me another chance," the person cried. "My stinky tofu can be even smellier. Believe me, give me another chance, don't throw me in there. Another poor guy who thinks he's smart." The orc shook his head and sneered. It's said that when he was caught, he really wanted to put feces in the stinky tofu. This kind of person who tarnishes cooking skills is not worthy of being a chef. Look, if there's any more trouble like this, there won't be a good ending. As it spoke, they saw the tentacle monster open a door and casually throw that person in. Amidst the stench, Huai Shi vaguely saw a mosaic septic tank. He heard a muffled sound from afar, and then the scream disappeared. Huai Shi shivered, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The pressure was great. At the end of the corridor was a huge arena, the number 09 audition area. Thousands of contestants had been divided into dozens of different areas to undergo the test. All the stoves were lined up in the middle of a trapezoidal square that resembled the Colosseum in Rome. The audience seats were already filled to the brim, and there were no empty seats. A thin layer of gray fog shrouded the faces of this group of visitors from hell and the border, hiding their shocking faces and identities. At this moment, they were just pure spectators, admiring the birth of a miracle in hell. On the judges' seats directly opposite them, there were several majestic figures. Their faces were hidden in the darkness, and only their cold and harsh eyes were staring at the trembling contestants. Soon, a judge turned his head and glanced at the attendant beside him. The attendant nodded, walked forward, and announced with his head held high, "The competition topic is dessert. Regardless of type or style." The eight-eyed attendant said coldly, "Submit your work to the judges within 15 minutes. Otherwise, be prepared to meet the fate of the loser." Huai Shi swallowed his saliva and looked at the contestants around him. Some of them were already trembling on their legs, while others were already full of fighting spirit. They pounced on the stoves, took out their tools and materials provided by the competition, and began to work furiously. Only Huai Shi stood in front of the stove with a blank face, looking around at a loss. The judges noticed that he was trying to slack off and frowned unhappily, casting cold pressure on him. The audience made irritated boos. "Get lost! Get lost! Get lost!" Huai Shi even saw that among them, the one who was shouting the loudest was a crow. "Damn it, you just want to see me unlucky, right?" Huai Shi speechlessly withdrew his gaze and forced himself to calm down. No matter what, he was a person who had seen the world. He could not be frightened by such a small battle. But what kind of dessert was he going to make? He flipped through the materials provided by the competition. It could be said that there were all kinds of fruits, milk, chocolate, but each of them exuded a strange color and smell. It did not look like it could be made delicious at all. This was expected. After all, it was the Demon Chef competition. It was impossible to make something like Big Dipper soul-subduing noodles. He randomly took a bunch of things and threw them on the chopping board. Then, Huai Shi was dumbfounded and did not know what to do. Fortunately, there was still a mobile phone signal here. Huai Shi felt as if he had been granted amnesty. He hurriedly searched for a recipe on the spot. Some sharp-eyed audience saw his screen, and the boos became louder. And just when Huai Shi was in a hurry, someone had already submitted a work. In a short 3 minutes, the goblin who held his head high had already laughed loudly, picked up the plate, and proudly glanced at the other stunned contestants. "Legacy, legacy, do you know? This competition, our green hair poison wine will definitely win." After that, he opened the plate and introduced it to the judges. "Please taste wine fermented tremella." On the plate, in 4 small bowls, crystal clear tremella floated among the attractive fruit. It did not look rotten at all. There was a faint fragrance which simply made people's appetite move. The audience who bought luxury packages could even synchronize their sense of smell and taste with the judges. They could even feel the sweetness in it. It was so tempting. When the small spoon was scooped into the mouth, a touch of sweetness burst out from the mouth and instantly occupied the tip of the tongue. When this touch of tempting sweetness had not dissipated, the demon hidden behind the sugar coating revealed a hideous smile. Then, the terrible spiciness, bitterness, and indescribable stench exploded from every corner of the mouth like a bomb. The judges paused, raised their heads, and spat out a stinky poisonous gas. However, their expressions were not unhappy at all. Instead, they were full of surprise and straightforwardness. "Wonderful!" At the front, a judge who looked like a hippo in a suit opened his mouth and picked up a small spoon. He scooped up the dessert in the bowl and clicked his tongue in wonder. "It's too rare. Did you bring all the ingredients yourself? This kind of tremella smoked with sulfur is simply wonderful. It's matched with these strawberries ripened with hormones, and the grass ridge dyed with the pigment to look like green tea. As for the Dominator, it's the exquisitely brewed legacy of hell, green hair poison wine. This sour taste is like licking the iron railings in the cold winter period. It's unforgettable." "No, there's a different taste." Next to the hippo, a skinny man raised his head. His eye sockets were sunken like a skeleton. His voice was hoarse. "You also used another material. It's hidden, but in fact, it's the most important foundation of this dessert." The judges frowned as they thought about it. "It's oil." The goblin smiled and continued to stutter. "I used hogwash oil, the hogwash oil mixed with green hair poison wine." Chapter 165. It's oil. The goblin smiled and continued to stutter. I used hogwash oil. I used green hair poisonous wine to mix hogwash oil." In an instant, the judges were stunned, then they exclaimed and applauded. "What an excellent combination! Outstanding taste! You really put a lot of thought into it." Soon, the judges put down their empty bowls, wiped their mouths, and then looked at each other. The hippo said, Unfortunately, it's not qualified. The skinny man raised his hand, 3 points. The one-eyed tentacle monster raised his sign, 4 points. The pale translucent banshee shook her head, 2 points. A towering shadow sitting at the back said in a deep voice, 1 point. Not a single judge gave a passing score to the full score of 10. Impossible. The goblin shook his head in a daze and staggered back. I know what you want to ask. You want to ask why we gave a good review just now, right? The hippo indifferently wiped the white fungus fragments on his front teeth with a silk handkerchief and casually spat. It's very simple. Because the materials you used are of the best quality. I can see that you spent a lot of money and your cooking is barely passable. Anyway, as long as the materials are good enough, any lousy cooking can be done. But there's one thing you don't have. The hippo raised a finger and said solemnly, I can't feel your intentions in your food. He said, there's no intention in your cooking. Bullshit. Bullshit. The goblin was furious. He couldn't accept such a nonsensical excuse. He angrily climbed up the table and pointed at the hippo's face. What bullshit intentions? What bullshit intentions? Eating a lousy meal. Will the taste be different if the chef is in a bad mood? Ignorant. Shallow. Pitiful. The judges weren't angry. Instead, they looked at the goblin with pity, as if they were looking at a frog at the bottom of a well. At the back, the mysterious shadow said in a cold voice, Too stupid. You're too attached to the appearance and ignore the essence. Let me ask you, what is the so-called food? The goblin was stunned. There's only one answer. The shadow raised a finger. Food is the foundation of survival. It's the need of all living things. It's an innate need and an inseparable part of life. Because of this, it's given a lot of value and many expectations. The shadow's voice was like thunder. If tasting good food is the innate desire of all living things, then the dark cuisine required by the cooking demon competition is the most primitive, ancient, and cruel essence of evil. Do we need a processor like a kitchen helper? A machine that only knows how to follow a recipe's order? The goblin, the demonses, he said the voice. What we are waiting is, the essence created is the essence created by disaster and despair. What we desire is demonic cuisine that can let us enjoy while chewing. But you're unqualified. Under the direction of the black shadow, the goblin knelt on the ground in exhaustion. His face was pale, but he was still unwilling. I don't accept this. What right do you have to say that my food is heartless? He was so angry that he even stopped stuttering. I refuse to accept this. The shadow waved his hand slightly, indicating for the guards to retreat to the side. Soon, an indifferent attendant came forward and put down a plate. This is the leftover material left behind by the contestants from the previous round. If you really have the heart of a chef, then give it a try. The goblin was stunned for a long time. He looked at the broken chocolate layer in front of him in disbelief. He couldn't understand how this thing could surpass his own work. But when he reached out and picked up a piece and put it in his mouth, he was stunned. His pale face turned ashen. He couldn't believe it. As if he was struck by lightning, he seemed to have suddenly understood something. In his daze, a stream of blood and tears flowed down. Why? He looked up and shouted, Why isn't my son my own? How am I not better than the goblin next door? God, why? With blood and tears, he wailed and choked. He suddenly tore off his belt and wrapped it around the fence. Then, he kicked his legs and hung himself on it. Not long after, he stopped moving. He was dead. Sure looked at all this in a daze. When he saw the remaining chocolate layer on the ground, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Is the heart of a chef in the dark cuisine world so powerful? Maybe it can even prolong one's life. But in an instant, he froze for a moment and reacted. Wait, prolong one's life? Isn't this alchemy? In other words, instantly, his eyes lit up. In the audience, Crow couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Only now did he react. How slow is this child's nerves? That's right. In this so-called demon chef competition, the unpalatable food was just a facade. The real competition originated from the malice and darkness of the chef. It deserved to be called the dark cuisine world. In this regard, you, a negative energy creation machine, should be like a fish in water. As time passed slowly, 15 minutes flashed by. The contestants submitted their works one after another. Some were successfully promoted, while others were swept out of the door in a crushing defeat, facing the consequences of failure. Gradually, in the end, only Huai Shi was left in the arena, standing in front of the iron pot with his arms in his arms. Amidst the impatient voices of the audience, Huai Shi lifted the lid of the pot, picked up a colander, and scooped up all the boiling taro balls. She poured them over ice cubes, then took out a large block of ice from the fridge. She spread out her hands, grabbed 2 kitchen knives, and began chopping at the taro balls. The roar even suppressed the audience's boos. After countless ice crystals flew out, what was left behind were 4 ice bowls of uniform size. The ice powder that was chopped into powder was piled on the chopping board, forming a small mountain. Hippo couldn't help but laugh. "Young man, you're quite ritualistic." "It's a failure anyway." The skinny man withdrew his gaze without interest. "There's nothing new about things like smoothies." Almost at the sound of the countdown bell, Huai Shi deftly filled the smoothies, put the taro balls in place, and then sprinkled cream, chocolate sauce, matcha powder, and other condiments. 4 bowls of smoothies that emitted cold air were ready. They were placed in front of the judges. The banshee looked at him coldly. "Kid, if you're counting on your mediocre knife skills to get a ranking, you're in the wrong place. You've been pretending for so long. Don't even think about getting a score if you bring up a bowl of trash. Don't be impatient." Huai Shi took a step back, revealing a smile. "It hasn't been injected with a soul yet." As he spoke, Huai Shi raised his right arm in front of his chest, gently rubbing his thumb, index finger, and ring finger. As if dancing, he twisted his waist and gently rubbed his fingertip. A wisp of gray dust rustled from his fingertips. His posture was sacred, as if he was praying. Under the astonished gazes of the judges, the tribulation ash streaked across his elbow and scattered evenly on the smoothies. In the twinkling of an eye, it noiselessly sank into the layers of frost, as if it had disappeared. But in a flash, everyone could feel that this bowl of smoothies was different. It was as if it possessed a soul. "Blessing smoothies, please." Huai Shi smiled and gestured. The hippo was stunned for a moment, but soon furrowed his brows. He picked up a spoon, scooped up a spoonful of smoothies, and put it into his mouth. His expression was sluggish and expectant. Soon, he reacted. He directly picked up the bowl of smoothies and madly devoured it. In the end, he even stuffed the bowl into his mouth, chewing until it was crisp and crunchy. In a flash, the crisp texture and rich impact spread through the entire venue at the same time along with his taste bud. No more clamor or boos were heard. Everyone was dumbfounded in place. It was as if they had been frozen. Their complexions became ashen, and their bodies fiercely twitched. In the end, they gradually lost their color, as if they had lost their strength in a long period of hard work. They were full of exhaustion. This is, after a long time, the hippo slowly raised his head, and a sentimental tear fell from the corner of his eye. Ah, this cold impact and full of malice, the inescapable depression and sadness. Like endless overtime and hard labor, the body is gradually hollowed out in the false chicken blood born from self-deception. But in the heart, I can't help but feel a wonderful sense of happiness. He picked up a napkin and slowly wiped the corners of his eyes. He recovered his calm and judged from the bottom of his heart. Excellent. Pure despair and malice. What a pure culinary heart. The skinny man took a bite and didn't eat any more. His eyes seemed to be burning with the flames of excitement, which made people shudder. It's as if I can see a 996 working man coming home and seeing a strange man lying on his wife's bed. From anger to exhaustion, and finally, I choose to forgive. I actually feel a sense of relief, as if, isn't this pretty good? The banshee leaned in front of the bowl of ice and took a deep breath. Soon after, she began to tremble as if she had taken drugs, and the bowl of ice silently melted into water. Oh, this kind of happiness that directly overflows from the heart of a chef is so nostalgic. She pursed her lips. Through the frost, the intensity of the happiness is ingeniously diluted, but it makes this happiness even more long-lasting. Yes, this kind of satisfaction is worthy of the name of a blessing. Although the technique is immature, this creativity is admirable. In the long silence, only the chewing sound at the end of the table could be heard. The huge shadow tasted Huaishi's dishes unhurriedly, spoonful after spoonful. In the end, he gently put down the bowl. After pointing out Goblin's flaws, he finally spoke up. Only one word. Okay. 4 scorecards were raised. 7 points, 7 points, 8 points, 6 points. Preliminary round passed. On the list of the top 16, a new name appeared again. Huaishi advanced. Poor hospitality. Huaishi pulled off the apron on his body and turned to walk to the lounge with a smile. Unlike the confusion and uneasiness 15 minutes ago, at this moment, his heart was full of calmness and confidence. If it had to be expressed in words, then it could be summed up in a few words. I'll be the king of chefs. Chapter 166. Then, when he returned to the lounge, he saw blood staining the wall. The floor was a mess. In the large lounge, there were 3 unrecognizable corpses. It was so miserable that Huaishi's scalp went numb. Oh my God! He could almost reconstruct the scene before the death of these inhuman beings. What happened? They got up from their seats and stood in the middle of the lounge. Then, the knife stabbed into the heart of the one in the middle, then the one on the right, and finally the one on the left. Like moving clouds and flowing water, before blood even spurted out, the limbs were cut off. Cutting melons and vegetables. Eyes, liver, arteries, lower body, kidneys, the momentary ravaging seemed to be endless. In the end, the knife cut off their throats and necks. From left to right, the blood that had been brewing for a long time finally gushed out, sputtering on the ceiling and dyeing everything red. They were finally dead. What's going on? Huaishi looked around the empty lounge in shock. No one paid attention to him. Occasionally, when someone raised their eyes, they looked at him with eyes full of coldness and ferocity. Only in the corner, the big sister who had just comforted him waved at him, motioning for him to sit down. You have to be careful, the big sister whispered. The lounge doesn't prohibit fighting to the death. Look at those guys, oh, they died tragically. Huaishi shook his head and sighed. Looking at the contestants who had advanced to the top 16. Well, now only the top 13 contestants were left. But he didn't see the previous senior brothers and sisters. He also didn't see the masters of Maobu and Xiaoxilu. It was a good thing that they weren't here. After all, it was just their cooking that tasted bad. They didn't have to stay and risk their lives. They just came to participate in an exhibition match to stir up the atmosphere. The big sister explained, after all, for the judges, their works were too ordinary. They were invited in the hope of expanding their influence. They must be properly encouraged. Well, the case was solved. The reason why so many people's cooking tasted bad was found. Huaishi's face twitched. He didn't know what to say. I thought you would be eliminated in the first round, but you're surprisingly strong. The big sister patted his shoulder in amazement. You have to go easy on me when you meet me in the next competition. Huaishi didn't know how to respond for a moment, but seeing his awkward expression, the big sister laughed happily again. I'm just joking. Just perform as usual. She smiled and winked. After all, if we're talking about how bad it tastes, I won't lose. As long as you're happy. Huai Shi was speechless. In any case, there was only one round left in the competition. After all, it was only a regional audition. It was impossible to go through 5 rounds to determine the strongest. Therefore, they used the round of 16 to round of 8. In other words, as long as one entered the top 8, they would be able to get a ticket to the global competition and receive the rewards provided by the organizing committee. Fortunately, it wasn't 16 to 8 but 13 to 8. The difficulty was slightly lower. However, Huai Shi was a little curious as to what kind of questions the judges would give next. The door was pushed open. Not long ago, the waiter who had conveyed the examiners walked into the lounge. He looked down at the corpses at his feet and seemed to be stunned. However, it didn't seem like he had discovered that someone had killed someone. Instead, he seemed to be sighing. Why were there only a few people who died this time? It seems that they all know the rules. He calmly withdrew his gaze and looked at the contestant. The next competition will begin in an hour. There are no restrictions on cuisine, style, or method. The topic is seafood. Contestants, please get ready. After announcing this, he turned and left. The atmosphere in the lounge was stagnant again. Seafood. In the following time, no one tried to act rashly. Or rather, some people seemed to be eager to try, but they felt that the remaining contestants were hard to deal with, so they didn't try to make a move. And the big sister squeezed next to Huai Shi as if she had already expected this. She smiled harmlessly as if announcing that she was with him. He found himself a bodyguard. Huai Shi was helpless. He shook his head and asked, "How should I address you?" Luo Xian, Xian as in skillful. The big sister reached out and gently shook his hand. Her palm was soft like water, and her smile was sweet. Huai Shi was a little unaccustomed to such a big sister's attack. He coughed awkwardly and moved a little. Huai Shi as in poem. Oh? Is a girl's feelings always a poem? Good name. Luo Xian snorted twice and didn't tease him anymore. Instead, she closed her eyes and seemed to be focused on thinking about the question. Then, not long after, there was the sound of snoring. Hey! Huai Shi reached out and gently pushed her shoulder. Aren't you prepared at all? Anyway, it will taste bad no matter how you cook it. Do I need to prepare? Luo Xian narrowed her eyes indifferently and leaned against the wall. I'm going to sleep for a while. Call me when it's time. Well, she was so friendly to this extent. Huai Shi shook his head helplessly and began to think about the cooking method of the seafood, or rather, he quickly took out his mobile phone and searched for the recipe on the spot. Inspiration like fortune smoothie was not common. He could fool around with desserts, but if he wanted to cook the main dish, he couldn't rely on his own knife skills. Fortunately, Crow had prepared a lot of things under the box. Huai Shi's eyes lit up as he flipped through. It seemed maybe possible? He pinched his chin and fell into deep thought while Luo Xian was snoring. An hour passed in the blink of an eye. When the door opened again, all the players subconsciously stood up and were ready to go. Only Huai Shi was still helplessly pushing Luo Xian's shoulder. Wake up, the game has started, Luo Xian opened her eyes, rubbed her face and tidied up her messy hair. She smacked her lips and picked up the box beside her. Let's go. Huai Shi sighed, suddenly feeling powerless. Why was it so tiring to meet someone who was even more fearless than him? As they walked along the corridor, the closer they got to the arena, the more they could feel the solemnity in the air, as well as the darkness and pain amidst the countless scattered origin substances. It was as if they were walking step by step into hell. After passing the preliminaries, it was as if the veil of the Chef Demon tournament had finally been lifted, revealing the viciousness that was hidden beneath his comical appearance. The instant Huai Shi stepped onto the arena, the air seemed to shatter. Uncontrollably, grayish-black flames rose from his body, revealing the face of a ghost. Through the peppa steel mask, a bone-piercing chill spread in all directions, causing all the contestants to look over vigilantly. Not only Huaishur, but all the other contestants also revealed their true faces. Layers of darkness aura spread out from the ascendants' bodies, colliding with each other and disturbing each other, producing ear-piercing sounds. The grey fog nightmare rising from the Een soul fire was quickly retracted and suppressed. It was only now that Huaishur discovered that there was actually a fourth tier hidden among the contestants. Wearing pitch-black armor, the stooped figure slowly moved forward, and the face of a spectral warhorse slowly emerged from the origin substance. It was actually a wild hunter. The death march that swept through the European continent in the dead of night was like a ghost rider from the underworld. The wild hunter didn't care that his true face had been exposed. He only casually glanced around before stepping onto the arena. Huaishur subconsciously looked at his elder sister, Luo Xian, who had been smiling sweetly the whole time. However, he discovered that she hadn't changed in the slightest. There wasn't any aura of the sacred mark in her body. She was just a sublimator who had never advanced in any way. Even so, Huaishur felt a chill in his heart. It was a warning from the premonition of death. This woman who had been smiling sweetly the whole time had the ability to kill him at any time. Aya, so impressive. This sacred mark, what kind of system is it? I've never seen it before. Luo Xian sensed his gaze and looked over, smiling as she teased him. However, she didn't pursue the matter and only patted his shoulder. Do your best in the competition. She walked to the front. Only after she had walked far away did Huaishur's back slowly seep out a trace of inexplicable cold sweat, as if he was afraid. It was very puzzling. But soon, as the bell rang and the audience roared with excitement, the competition officially began. The topic was seafood. The time limit was 1 hour. There were no restrictions on the type of cuisine, cooking method, style. There was only one requirement. The contestants had to use all their abilities to present their cruelest and most vicious creations to the judges. At the back of the judges' table, under the gaze of the huge shadow that had never revealed his true face, the real auditions of the Chef Demon tournament had finally begun. Everyone neatly opened their toolboxes and began to cook. And in that instant, everyone's movements simultaneously paused, stiffening in place. They turned their heads and looked at the corner in astonishment. It was a terrifying killing intent that had extinguished countless origin substances in an instant, as if it had transformed into a tidal wave that surged towards the sky. Luo Xian. In the instant that she grasped the handle of the kitchen knife, that gentle big sister seemed to have disappeared. What replaced it was something that was hard to understand. If one were to forcefully describe it with words, it was like tearing open the skin and revealing the sinister nature hidden in the darkness. After the predator took off his mask of gentleness, he emitted a chilling murderous aura. Monster. She was clearly an ascendant who hadn't advanced and didn't possess any sacred marks, but the killing intent bursting forth from Luo Xian at this moment made even the fourth-step wild hunter feel a chill down his spine. Just by looking at the figure who had lowered his head and was focused on scraping fish scales, it was as if he could feel the cold sensation of the blade moving around his body, imagining his body being torn apart under that blade. Huaishur's eyes stung. Chapter 167. For a moment, he realized what it took to be called a genius. The so-called Tianqing's talent was to describe this terrible essence and talent that no one could imitate or touch. Just holding the knife, without anything else, made people experience the fear of cattle and sheep waiting to be slaughtered. He finally understood how the 3 corpses in the lounge were created, and the strange eyes that those people looked at him with were clearly directed at Luo Xian next to him. As for himself, he sat beside the sleeping Godzilla for a full hour. He spent 3,600 seconds hovering on the edge of death. Huaishur swallowed his saliva, reluctantly withdrew his gaze, and focused on moving out all the tools that Crow prepared for him from his toolbox. Strainer, measuring cup, reactor, strainer, dropper, syringe. Then came the big items. A small water bath pot, a light alchemy centrifuge, a complete set of extraction and purification equipment, and a thermos full of liquid ammonia. And a series of fragmented raw materials. These were the kitchen utensils he had to rely on. Compared to kitchen utensils, they were more like alchemy equipment. What kind of chef is this? A man next to him, wearing a tattered cloak and with a face full of ulcers, looked up and couldn't help but sneer. With so much equipment, are you here to perform acrobatics or to cook? He coldly glanced at Huaishur. Do you think the judges haven't seen alchemy before? For a moment, even the judges on the judging panel couldn't help but frown. Huaishur opened the material box provided by the organizer, pulled out a 3-meter-long squid covered with barbs, and smashed it on the table. Hearing his words, he raised his eyes and glanced over. Don't be surprised. He raised his middle finger and asked, Have you heard of molecular cuisine? For a moment, not only him and the judges, but even the audience was stunned. What the hell, molecular cuisine? How fresh! For so many years in the dark cuisine world, there were all kinds of cuisines, but this was the first time someone wanted to create a molecular cuisine. Even the skeptic opened his mouth in shock, and a piece of the ulcers used for disguise on his face almost fell off. He immediately reacted and put the disguise on his face again. He just sneered and looked away. The competition continued. But today's competition was completely different from the previous one. Not only the atmosphere, but also the ingredients and the cooking methods of other chefs. There was no need to distinguish at all. When Huaishur cut open the squid, he found that there was basically no place on this thing that a normal person could eat. Even with his beginner level of alchemy, he was able to determine that every part of this thing carried a deadly poison. There were also the cooking methods of other chefs, the strange condiments, and the pungent smell rising from the pot. The rising flames illuminated the sinister grins on their faces. Rather than saying that they were cooking something unpalatable, it was better to say that they were thinking about how to poison the food. Only Luo Xian was cutting vegetables, heating the pot, and then cutting the pickled vegetables. It seemed that she was really preparing to make a pot of pickled fish. Although she was looking left and right, Huaishur's movements didn't stop at all. She grabbed the kitchen knife with both hands and dug out the squid's innard. After a series of crackling sounds, she cut the squid into pieces. Then, he suddenly heard the sound of wind in his ear. Without hesitation, Huaishur raised the knife in his hand and slashed forward. When the barb that flew over was cut down, he raised his head and looked at the source of the barb, the man with the ulcers. He was holding a fish full of barbs and looked at Huaishur innocently. Sorry, it was a mistake, are you okay? I'm fine. Huaishur grinned. It was a mistake. His hands did not stop moving. He directly picked up a pair of pliers and stabbed it into the material box. He pulled out a strange water snake and slammed it on the chopping board. As he spoke, the knife fell and chopped off the snake's head. The strange snake's head flew up, still hissing and spitting out its poisonous tongue, opening its mouth to bite. Coincidentally, it flew in the direction of the man with the ulcers. My hand slipped, in Huaishur's apologetic voice. The man with the ulcers dodged in a panic. The snake's head drew an arc in the air and fell into his boiling soup pot. A foul stench immediately rose from the milky bone broth. All his previous efforts were wasted. The man with the ulcer's expression suddenly twisted, as if he wanted to attack, but he did not pounce. His expression only twitched, and he retracted his gaze. Obviously, under the eyes of the judges, the interference between the contestants was regarded as permitted behavior. It was better to say that the audience was happy to watch the contestants secretly fight to the death. But directly attacking the contestants was against the rules. Huaishur raised his eyebrows. He felt that he had understood something, but he did not say anything. He continued to concentrate on preparing his work. After the squid was processed, the next step was the chili. He directly chose the devil pepper from America from the materials provided by the organizer. It was said that at the border there were really border mutants who would grow this kind of spicy chili, and the one provided by the organizer was undoubtedly the best among them. Huai Shi chopped down with a knife and was already in tears. The choking and horrible smell spread in an instant, almost covering the entire arena. Everyone was shrouded in this horrible burning smell. After a while of chopping, Huai Shi quickly put this thing into a bag and sealed it. Next was ginger, pepper. Pile after pile of heavy things were poured into the basin. The whole basin instantly became a small hell, with all kinds of uncomfortable colors. The contestants next to him were already dumbfounded. What the F***ck molecular cuisine? This is molecular Sichuan cuisine. At this moment, Huai Shi's vision suddenly turned black. He felt that it was difficult to breathe, and he coughed violently. A sour and bitter smell suddenly surged in the air, spreading in all directions. Everywhere it passed, the movements of all the contestants suddenly became sluggish, and they felt their consciousness gradually become dizzy and absent-minded. It's poisonous. When Huai Shi abruptly raised her head, she saw the man with the rotten face sneering at her, as well as the strange soup in the boiling iron pot in front of him. The horrible smell comparable to poisonous gas spread out from it. Not to mention how horrible the soup was, just the residual poison was enough to make several contestants fall down quickly, foaming at the mouth. Soon, they were dragged down because they lost the ability to compete. In an instant, the number of contestants decreased by more than half. Only 6 contestants were left. Sorry, the smell seems a bit strong. The rotten man scooped up a spoonful of soup with a soup spoon, and carefully sniffed at the tip of his nose. He raised his head and revealed a mocking smile. It didn't cause any disturbance to you, did it? No, no. Huai Shi was still smiling. Although it was covered by the mask, there was no blame or dissatisfaction in his eyes. Later on, the smell here may be a bit stronger. Please forgive me. With that, he reached out and took out an injection gun from his pocket. He aimed it at his neck and pulled the trigger. In an instant, the strong antidote was injected into the artery, and it instantly circulated throughout his body. Looking at his stubborn appearance, the rotten man snorted and withdrew his gaze. He wanted to see how long Huai Shi could last in his poisonous fog. Boom! Just in front of him, the stove in front of Wild Hunt suddenly spewed out a burst of fire, and countless flies flew out, turning into a black cloud and spreading out. Immediately after, another contestant opened the lid of his own pot, and countless screaming spirits came out of it, crazily pouncing in all directions with the rotten man taking the lead. The whole arena instantly fell into chaos. The audience, on the other hand, shouted excitedly, cheering for the contestants they were optimistic about. They couldn't wait for someone to immediately pull out a knife and chop the others to death. In the chaotic struggle, Huai Shi seemed to be uninvolved. The fire of calamity flashed on the kitchen knife, and after killing the flies, ghosts, phantoms, and other ghosts that flew over, he threw the kitchen knife aside and focused on stirring the spices that he had chopped. Soon, he put the evenly mixed spices on the stove. A trace of alchemy fire flowed out from his fingertips and quietly mixed into the blue flame. Then, Huai Shi threw down the kitchen knife and stretched out his hand. The moment the cross spear appeared, Luo Xian seemed to be aware of it. She raised her head and looked at Huai Shi, the corners of her eyes slightly raised. The shadow of the spear blade was hidden under Huai Shi's palm. On the blade of the spear that was only partially materialized, streams of sticky dragon blood dripped down and disappeared into the spices, blossoming into pure white iris flowers silently. But then, the iris flowers were also cut into pieces. They merged into the spices, and with Huai Shi's stirring, they gradually disappeared. Only the fragrant aroma, under the stimulation of the alchemy fire, spread out bit by bit, quietly seeping into the noisy arena at this moment and spreading to the surroundings. Was it fun to use Aeoli? Huaishur smiled. Now it was his turn. He increased the firepower in his hand, urging more of the flower fragrance in the dragon blood. The sweet flower fragrance was so conspicuous among the countless stenches and pungent smells. When the sweet fragrance bloomed at the tip of the nose, all the contestants were stunned. Immediately, they felt an irresistible tiredness and sleepiness emerge from their bodies. Especially the rotten man who was taken care of by Huaishur. 80% of the fragrance floated to his place under his secret instigation. He staggered, and his whole body lay on the stove, twitching with difficulty. Half of his face was burned by the fire, and it was incomparably hideous. When he turned his head with difficulty, he saw a pink pig mask smiling at him. "Are you not feeling well?" Huaishur looked at him with concern. "Remember to see a doctor." After the burned ulcers peeled off, what was revealed was actually white skin and a beautiful side profile. Aware that her disguise was broken, she awkwardly climbed up from the stove and pulled up a tattered cloak to cover her face. Her eyes were full of coldness and anger when she looked at Huaishur. "Not bad, Auntie." Huaishur whistled. "Your skin is so well maintained, you don't look like you're in your 40s at all." Bang! It was impossible to distinguish the sound of teeth grinding, or the sound of a kitchen knife being crushed. Chapter 168. The man with rotten sores gave Huaishur one last hateful glare before withdrawing his gaze. With great difficulty, he began to concoct the antidote. Every contestant here was a master of poisons. Even if they couldn't completely eradicate the poison, they could still resist the weakened fragrance of the flowers. After all, he couldn't just go over and stab him. After being deluded by the iris flowers and the fragrance of the flowers, the effects of the dragon blood were quite limited. Very quickly, Huaishur stopped releasing the poison. Even though the dragon blood was endless, it consumed his own origin substance. Even with Huaishur's large reserves compared to other contestants of the same level, it was still a bit difficult for him to release the poison for more than 10 minutes. After 2 more people left the stage, there were only 4 people left on the stage. Wild Hunt, Man with Rotten Sores, Huaishur and Luoxian. Luoxian was very calm from beginning to end. It was as if she hadn't noticed anything strange. She was currently sitting on a small stool and looking at the pickled fish in her pot. To be honest, Huaishur couldn't tell where the poison was at all. There were no traces or signs of it at all. It was just a very ordinary pot of pickled fish. Logically speaking, there were only 4 contestants left in the round of 16, so there was no need to continue the competition. However, the judges didn't stop the competition. Instead, their gazes became even more serious and scrutinizing. Time quickly passed. At the 45th minute mark, Wild Hunt was the first to present his work. Salt roasted spring fish. After the brush swept away the salt on the surface, a strange fragrance spread out along with the cracking of the fish skin. Everyone who smelled the fragrance instantly fell into a trance. Immediately afterwards, they couldn't help but become excited. Damn, Huaishur staggered back a step, covering his mouth as sweat poured down his back. That smell, even though it had drifted so far away, still had a terrifying hallucinogenic effect that wasn't inferior to any forbidden medicine. In just a short moment, Huaishur's eyes were filled with illusions. Countless specks of light appeared out of nowhere, and the entire arena became gorgeous, as if they had ascended to heaven. The sky and earth were spinning. If it weren't for the poison resistance that Crow had cultivated, he probably would have already collapsed to the ground, foaming at the mouth like a drug addict after getting high. This was under the premise that he had injected an antidote beforehand. Oh my God, dark cuisine is so scary. Huaishur covered her nose and almost sucked in a breath of cold air out of habit. On the other hand, the judges acted as if nothing had happened. Each of them grabbed a skewer and placed it in their mouths, chewing it in large mouthfuls. crunching sounds rang out, and the alluring aroma immediately became thicker and thicker. It was so tempting that it almost made people want to pounce on it and grab a skewer to eat. A few minutes later, the grilled fish disappeared from the mouths of the judges. The aroma lingered for a long time, causing all of the remaining contestants to fall into a trance. I know you. You were the runner-up of the Rome division 10 years ago. I didn't expect you to appear here. The skinny judge looked up. I thought you would go back to Rome to participate in the audition there. Just looking for materials, Wild Hunt said calmly. And the result? Is my work up to standard, sir? Perfect taste. This deadly illusion is concentrated in the fish. With the explosion of the fish roe, it brings a dazzling sense of depravity. Wonderful work. The skinny man nodded and praised. It seems that your attainments have improved. Congratulations. I hope you can achieve new results in the global competition in half a year. Wild Hunt nodded calmly and turned to the lounge. The second person to serve the dish was the Rotten Man. But just as she walked to the front of the judges' table, someone stepped in from the side and blocked her way. Sorry, I'll go first. Through the mask, Huai Shi gave her a happy smile. She was about to say something, but Huai Shi had already put the plate in his hand on the table. Her face twitched a few times, and she took 2 steps back. She didn't want to compete with Huai Shi for the order. Then, she saw Huai Shi secretly raise his middle finger from behind. Her eyes instantly seemed to spit fire. She couldn't wait to chop this bastard to death. And Huai Shi had already put the 4 dishes covered under the cover on the table. He took a step back and smiled at the judges. Please. Several judges looked at each other, reached out, and opened the cover. At that moment, everyone was stunned. The big stadium was silent in an instant, because a bright golden light gushed out from under the cover, illuminating pairs of incredulous eyes. Light! It emitted light. Is there really a dish in this world that can emit light? Even Hippo was stunned on the spot. What is this? After I finished, I saw that there was still time left, so I casually made an earth battery with copper, zinc, and other electrolytes. Huai Shi calmly reached out and helped him lift the cover, showing him the set of earth battery and tungsten wire welded inside the cover. How is it? Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Hippo was stunned. After a long time, he couldn't help but laugh. For the first time in so many years, a contestant actually joked with him. It's delightful. He raised his head and laughed. Then, he rubbed his belly and said with a serious expression, Contestant, if your dish disappoints me, I will personally place a curse on you. As he spoke, he looked at the video on the plate. It seemed to be a square of butter? Or something else. He could vaguely smell the subtle fragrance of flowers, but it was like a big piece of soap, so he didn't know what was going on. Under the light, he could vaguely distinguish that the outermost layer of gelatinous material was just a shell. It was a plate. The real food and delicacies were sealed inside. It's really a molecular cuisine? Hippo picked up the table knife and spoon, and slightly knocked on the upper layer. A crisp sound was heard. Then, a torrent-like spiciness gushed out from it, and in an instant it seemed to be suffocating. It was indescribably rich. But when he couldn't bear the intense stimulation and was about to cough, the spiciness suddenly turned into a refreshing flower fragrance, soothing the convulsing lungs and pain, gently pulling people into a drowsy and destitute dream. Curry! The judges were stunned. It's actually curry? As the spoon was retracted from the oil shell, it turned out to be a crystal-like frozen object. When the pale yellow meat jelly was cut open, a yellow-brown viscous liquid slowly flowed out from it. It was the dan curry and the squid slices that had been smoldering until now. Once it came into contact with the air, it emitted a fresh fragrance like an explosion. Please enjoy the creative molecular cuisine, pigeon curry. Huai Shi took a step back, took off his apron, and reported the name of the dish with a smile. Pigeon. The judges were stunned. There was no pigeon. And this wasn't a pigeon, it was clearly a maggot in the dung sea. Not to mention the appearance of this yellowish-brown viscous curry, and the squid tentacles wriggling inside, just the stimulating smell was enough to make people retreat. This was no longer the level of purely unpalatable, it was the level of not wanting to eat it. No, in terms of dark cuisine, this point should be a plus. But the appearance was only the appearance, the essence should be the final, since it was served on the table, the judges wouldn't refuse. Moreover, the people who were willing to serve as judges of the demon chef competition were basically lunatics who were completely bored after tasting all the beauty in the world, or lunatics who were no longer satisfied by the positive energy feedback and went to the abyss to seek forbidden experiences. In this world, no matter if it was forbidden drugs, love, war, or any other meaningful or meaningless things, they couldn't touch them at all. Under their greedy desire, they threw themselves into the darkness, embraced the inhuman taboo, and bathed in sin to seek pleasure. The dish that Huaishur served was more to their liking. The premise was that the taste of this dish could surprise them. Otherwise, Huaishur would have to face 10 times the anger and curses, 100 times the unhappiness and punishment. I hope you can bring some surprises. The hippo took a deep look at Huaishur, picked up the spoon, and put the spoonful of fish jelly wrapped in thick curry into its mouth, chewing carefully. Then, all the judges were stunned in place. All the audience who synchronized their taste with the dish exclaimed in shock. Because there was no taste. The aroma was clearly so stimulating and domineering, and it looked so spicy and terrifying, but once it entered their mouths, there was no taste at all. It was like drinking a mouthful of water. It was empty. No matter how they chewed and tasted it, they couldn't taste a single trace of taste. It was like eating plastic. It was tasteless. After a moment of hesitation, they ate another spoonful. There was still no taste. There seemed to be a little bit of a feeling, but the more they explored, the more they couldn't find any trace of it. What replaced it was a deep sense of loss and annoyance from not being able to find it after a long time. As they continued to chew, they seemed to hear frivolous whispers in their ears. "It's a promise. I'll definitely come. I'm already on my way. I'll be there in 5 minutes. If you don't come, you're a puppy." Those casual words reverberated through the origin substance. As the origin substance continued to be chewed, the words reverberated in the ears of those who had tasted it. In the end, they were completely enraged. Enough. The hippo threw down the spoon with all his might, glaring angrily at Huaishur. "Your arrogance ends here." In that instant, he choked and coughed. Along with the eruption of his anger, the horrifying spiciness contained in the curry and the complicated taste of countless spices swept through his entire mouth from the tip of his tongue along with his uncontrollable anger. It engulfed him like a tidal wave, causing him to be stunned on the spot. In his daze, he felt like he was surrounded by the sound of countless pigeons flapping their wings. Thousands of cooing sounds spread out from the mutated origin substance, causing him to feel dizzy. From the tastelessness of his resistance to the spiciness of his anger, when he tried to carefully distinguish the taste in his astonishment, the spiciness quickly transformed into a thick sourness, causing his gums to twitch. As he was being toyed with like this, he felt a deep sense of exhaustion. Even the taste of the frozen fish in his mouth became bitter. In the end, he was finally able to comprehend something amidst the countless illusions and taste. The hippo muttered in a daze, got stood up? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.